Hey everyone. Tonight we're journeying deep into the most mysterious, ancient, and utterly fascinating secrets that our planet's underground holds. From massive cave systems that shouldn't exist, to tunnels that twist without explanation. From subterranean cities, lost to time, to sounds so peculiar they've kept researchers awake at night. The earth beneath our feet is filled with countless caverns and passages, yet we've explored less than 10% of what might exist below. That means there's a whole world down there waiting in the darkness filled with mysteries that would make your wildest dreams seem like ordinary thoughts. So before we descend into these earthen depths together, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy exploring the unknown with me. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's brave enough to join us on these midnight journeys into the underworld. Now dim the lights, maybe grab a warm blanket, and let's ease into tonight's exploration of Earth's darkest subterranean secrets. When you think of caves, you might picture tourist attractions with handrails, floodlights, and informative plaques detailing the age of various formations. But tonight, we're going somewhere else entirely. We're going to the places where human footprints are rare or non-existent, where passages squeeze down to mere inches, and where ecosystems exist that have evolved in complete isolation from our surface world. The underground realm isn't just empty space. It's a three-dimensional labyrinth that exists right here, beneath our feet, filled with formations so bizarre they look like they were crafted by an artist, having a particularly surreal dream. A realm where blind fish navigate by sensing water pressure, where crystals grow to the size of school buses, and where the very geography itself seems to shift and change like a living entity. Picture this. You're standing at the mouth of a cave on a calm evening. The entrance is a dark void, seemingly absorbing the fading daylight around it. But within that void, stretching down for miles and miles, is a maze so vast that if you mapped all its passages, they could potentially cross entire countries without ever seeing sunlight. And in that darkness, air currents are moving, water is flowing, minerals are growing, all following ancient patterns established millions of years before humans ever walked the earth. The underground doesn't concern itself with your anxieties or comfort zone. It operates by rules so foreign to our surface-dwelling minds that even our most advanced geological science struggles to fully comprehend them. Down there in the deepest caverns, the isolation is so complete that some chambers have remained undisturbed for hundreds of thousands of years. It would be like stepping into a time capsule where the air you breathe might not have circulated with the outside atmosphere since Neanderthals walked the earth. And yet life finds a way there. Not just survives, thrives. Creatures that have never seen sunlight, that have never felt warmth from our star, that exist in worlds of eternal darkness and constant temperature. They've adapted to conditions so extreme that they might as well be living on another planet entirely. Some of them have lost their eyes completely, having no use for organs of sight in a world without light. Others have evolved heightened senses of touch and vibration detection, becoming living seismographs in the darkness. But here's what really keeps biologists up at night. We keep finding new things down there, new passages, new species, new ecosystems, new mysteries that challenge everything we thought we knew about life on Earth. Every major cave expedition brings back evidence of formations or creatures that seem to defy conventional understanding. And for every new discovery, dozens more questions emerge from the shadows. The underground has been keeping secrets for hundreds of millions of years, and it guards them within layers of solid rock. It shields its mysteries jealously, hidden beneath miles of limestone and granite, accessible only through the narrowest of passages. But tonight, we're going to descend into that hidden world and explore some of the most mind-bending, perception-altering, absolutely mesmerizing mysteries that lurk in the depths. Because if you think you know what's extraordinary, wait until you hear about what's been existing in the deepest parts of our planet's crust, right beneath our feet, all this time. And the truly humbling part. We're just beginning to scratch the surface of what lies below. Let's start our journey in a place that sounds like it came straight out of a fantasy novel, Mammoth Cave. Located in the state of Kentucky, this underground labyrinth is the longest known cave system on Earth, with more than 400 miles of surveyed passageways. To put that in perspective, if you could somehow straighten all of Mammoth Cave's passages into a single line, it would stretch nearly the distance from New York City to Washington, D.C. Mammoth Cave isn't just long, it's ancient. The oldest parts of the system began forming around 10 million years ago, meaning that these passages were already ancient, when the first human ancestors began walking upright. The temperature hovers around a constant 54 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, unaffected by the seasons or weather patterns that shape our lives on the surface. It's as close to visiting another world as you can get without leaving Earth. But Mammoth Cave holds a more somber history as well. Deep within its passages, explorers have found evidence of ancient human activity dating back thousands of years. Native Americans ventured miles into the darkness with nothing but reed torches for light, seeking minerals like gypsum and mirabilite. We found their footprints, preserved in the soft clay of passages that have remained undisturbed for millennia. Imagine being those first explorers, venturing into absolute darkness with primitive lighting, never knowing if your flame might suddenly extinguish, leaving you in a blackness so complete that your mind would begin to hallucinate patterns, just to give your eyes something to process. The cave has more recent human history too. In the early 19th century, enslaved guides like Stephen Bishop mapped huge portions of the cave system, becoming legendary for their courage and skill in navigating the underground maze. Bishop discovered many of the cave's most spectacular features, including the bottomless pit, a shaft that drops 105 feet into darkness. These early explorers had none of our modern equipment, no powerful LED headlamps, no GPS systems, no emergency radios, just simple lanterns and an extraordinary courage that's difficult for us to fully comprehend today. Even with all our technology, Mammoth Cave continues to grow on the map. Every year, specialized survey teams discover new passages, adding miles to the already vast system. The question that haunts speleologists isn't whether there are more passages to find, it's how many thousands of miles might still be waiting in the darkness, completely unknown to human knowledge. Some estimates suggest that the full extent of Mammoth Cave might be 2 or 3 times what we've currently mapped, with entire sections of the underground realm still waiting for the first human light to touch their ancient walls. But the physical passages are just the beginning of Mammoth Cave's mysteries. The ecosystem within the cave is a biologist's dream, and sometimes nightmare. Over 200 species have been identified within the cave system, many of them found nowhere else on Earth. There are blind fish that navigate by sensing pressure waves in the water, translucent crayfish with no pigmentation in their bodies, and tiny crustaceans that have evolved in complete isolation from their surface relatives for millions of years. These creatures exist in an ecosystem based not on sunlight and photosynthesis, but on the sparse nutrients that filter down from the world above. One of the most fascinating aspects of cave biology is how it demonstrates convergent evolution, the process where organisms not closely related develop similar traits because they live in similar environments. In caves around the world, creatures from different evolutionary lineages have all adapted in remarkably similar ways, losing pigmentation, losing eyes, developing enhanced non-visual senses. It's as if the cave environment is so demanding, so specific in its challenges, that it shapes life according to strict parameters, regardless of where that life began. But Mammoth Cave, for all its grandeur, is just our first stop on tonight's journey. Let's travel across the world to a place where the underground reveals some of its most spectacular visual treasures, the Hang Son Doong Cave in Vietnam. Discovered relatively recently in 1991 by a local man named Ho Can, Son Doong wasn't properly explored until a British caving team entered it in 2009. What they found defies imagination. Son Doong is currently recognized as the largest cave passage in the world by volume. Its main chamber is so enormous that it could comfortably house an entire New York City block, complete with 40-story skyscrapers. At its tallest point, the ceiling soars nearly 650 feet above the floor, high enough to fly a Boeing 747 through without touching the walls. The scale is so vast that the cave has its own weather system, with clouds forming inside the chamber and localized rain showers occurring entirely underground. But perhaps the most magical feature of Son Doong is its dahlines, places where the cave ceiling has collapsed, allowing sunlight to penetrate the darkness. In these areas, lush rainforest ecosystems have developed on the cave floor, creating surreal jungle islands surrounded by towering cave walls. Imagine walking through absolute darkness, the beam of your headlamp barely penetrating the void ahead, then suddenly emerging into a sunlit glade with trees stretching 100 feet upward toward a circular opening in the stone sky above. It's like discovering another world entirely, a secret garden hidden within the earth itself. Son Doong also features some of the most massive cave formations ever discovered. Stalagmites in the cave reach up to 80 meters tall, taller than a 24-story building. These stone titans have been growing at the glacial pace of less than a millimeter per year, meaning that they began forming tens of thousands of years before human civilization existed. When you stand before formations like these, you're confronted with the almost incomprehensible scale of geological time, a humbling reminder of how briefly our species has existed compared to the ancient processes of our planet. The cave also contains vast underground rivers and lakes of crystalline clarity, their waters filtering through miles of limestone before emerging in these subterranean chambers. Divers have attempted to map the underwater portions of the cave system, but many passages remain unexplored, their secrets still waiting in the darkness beyond our current reach. The full extent of Son Doong and its connected passages remains unknown, with new discoveries being made during each expedition. What makes Sandong particularly precious is that it represents one of the few major cave systems discovered in relatively pristine condition. Unlike many caves that have been modified for tourism with concrete walkways and artificial lighting, Sundong's remote location and difficult access have protected it from significant human impact. Visiting the cave requires a multi-day expedition through dense jungle, crossing rivers and camping underground, efforts that limit visitors to those truly dedicated to experiencing this underground wonder. This limited access has become increasingly important as we've come to understand how fragile cave environments can be. The delicate balance of cave ecosystems can be disrupted by something as simple as the oils from human skin affecting the growth of formations, or the heat from our bodies slightly changing the temperature and humidity that have remained constant for millennia. Even our breath, exhaling carbon dioxide into chambers that have maintained specific atmospheric compositions for thousands of years, can begin chemical changes in the cave environment. This is why many newly discovered cave sections are now immediately protected, with access limited to scientific research teams using strict protocols to minimize their impact. But not all of our planet's underground wonders are natural formations. Some of the most intriguing subterranean spaces were created by human hands, driven by necessity, spirituality, or purposes that remain mysterious even centuries later. Let's shift our attention to Cappadocia in central Turkey, where one of the most extensive underground cities in the world reveals how our ancestors created their own realm beneath the Earth's surface. Derinkuyu Underground City descends 8 levels into the soft volcanic rock of the region, reaching depths of over 250 feet. Built to house up to 20,000 people along with their livestock and food stores, this underground metropolis features all the elements needed for long-term human habitation: living quarters, stables, wells, ventilation shafts, communal spaces, and even churches with elaborate stone altars. Archaeological evidence suggests that Derinkuyu was first excavated by the Phrygians around the 8th to 7th centuries BCE, though it was significantly expanded during the Byzantine era. What makes Derinkuyu particularly fascinating is that it was designed with defense as a primary consideration. Each level could be sealed off from the others with massive stone doors, circular slabs weighing up to a ton that could only be opened from the inside. Narrow passageways would force any attackers to move in single file, making them vulnerable to defenders. Ventilation shafts that brought fresh air into the depths were designed with security in mind, preventing enemies from using them as entry points or for chemical warfare tactics like smoke. The city wasn't an isolated phenomenon. Derinkuyu connects to other underground settlements through miles of tunnels, forming a subterranean network across the Cappadocia region. Only about half of Derinkuyu has been excavated and open to visitors, with lower levels still awaiting proper archaeological study. This means that many of the city's secrets remain hidden, preserved in the darkness that has protected them for thousands of years. What would daily life have been like in such a place? Historical accounts suggest that the underground cities weren't permanent residences, but rather temporary refuges during periods of invasion or religious persecution. Still, evidence indicates that people sometimes lived below ground for months at a time, maintaining a semblance of normal society in these artificial caverns. Imagine being a child growing up during such times, perhaps experiencing extended periods where the sun was just a distant memory, where your entire world was defined by torchlit stone walls and the sounds of an entire community echoing through tunnels. The engineering knowledge required to create these spaces is impressive even by modern standards. The builders had to ensure proper ventilation throughout multiple levels, create water systems that wouldn't contaminate living areas, and excavate chambers large enough for communal activities while leaving sufficient support to prevent collapse. All of this was accomplished without modern power tools, using only human labor and simple implements to slowly carve a habitable world from solid rock. But Derinkuyu and other underground cities pose questions that go beyond their physical construction. They represent a chapter of human adaptation, our species' remarkable ability to reshape our environment, to create safety and community even in the most challenging circumstances. In the darkness beneath Cappadocia, people maintain their cultures, practice their religions, raise families, and preserve knowledge that might otherwise have been lost to invading forces. These underground spaces weren't just physical refuges, they were sanctuaries for human culture and identity during turbulent historical periods. Moving from human-made chambers to one of nature's most chemically hostile underground environments, let's journey to Mexico's Cueva de los Cristales, or Cave of Crystals. Located within the Nica mine in Chihuahua, this cave was discovered in 2000 by miners working nearly 1,000 feet below the surface. What they found seems to belong more in science fiction than reality. A chamber filled with gypsum crystals of extraordinary size, some reaching lengths of over 36 feet and weighing up to 55 tons. The crystals in Nica aren't just remarkable for their size, they're also some of the most perfectly formed mineral structures ever discovered. Massive beams of selenite, a transparent form of gypsum, crisscross the chamber like the structural supports of some alien cathedral. Some are as thick as tree trunks, their facets reflecting light with mathematical precision that seems almost artificial in its perfection. These formations make the typical stalagmites and stalactites found in tourist caves seem like miniature models by comparison. What makes this cave even more extraordinary is the environment that created these crystal giants. For the crystals to form, the cave maintained a consistent temperature of around 122 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity approaching 100% for hundreds of thousands of years. These conditions are lethal to unprotected humans. Explorers and scientists can only enter for short periods, using specialized cooling suits and breathing apparatus. Even with this equipment, the extreme heat and humidity limit human visits to about 30 minutes before the risk of hypothermia becomes life-threatening. The crystals themselves formed through an exquisitely slow process. The chamber was filled with mineral-rich water that maintained a temperature just at the threshold where gypsum crystallization could occur. Any hotter, and the crystals wouldn't form any cooler, and they would form too quickly, creating the smaller formations we see in more typical caves. This perfect balance was maintained for somewhere between 500,000 and 900,000 years, allowing the crystals to grow at the glacial pace of perhaps an inch or two per thousand years. This timescale is almost impossible for our human minds to truly comprehend. When the slowest growing crystals began forming, Homo sapiens didn't yet exist as a species. Entire human civilizations have risen and fallen in less time than it took for these mineral structures to reach their current dimensions. Standing among these formations is to confront deep time in physical form, to see the results of processes that operate on timescales so vast that our entire recorded history represents just a fleeting moment in comparison. Unfortunately, the Cave of Crystals presents a preservation dilemma. The crystal growth occurred while the chamber was filled with water. Mining operations pumped this water out, exposing the crystals to air for the first time in perhaps a million years. Without their liquid environment, the crystals have begun to deteriorate, their molecular structure changing as they react with the oxygen and fluctuating humidity levels of their new environment. Scientists estimate that left exposed, these magnificent formations that took 500,000 years to grow might significantly degrade within just a few human generations. The Nika mine eventually ceased active operations, allowing groundwater to reclaim the crystal cave. While this means the site is no longer accessible to visitors or researchers, it may actually be the best outcome for the crystals themselves, returning them to the conditions that preserved them for eons before human discovery. This situation highlights one of the persistent ethical questions in cave exploration. Is it better to document and study these wonders, knowing that human presence may contribute to their deterioration, or should some places remain untouched, their secrets preserved in darkness? From crystal cathedrals, let's venture to a place where water and rock have collaborated to create one of the most alien landscapes on our planet, the cenote of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. These natural sinkholes form when the ceiling of an underground river or water-filled cave collapses, creating circular pools that connect to vast underwater cave systems. The word cenote comes from the Mayan term DZ cenote, meaning well, though these formations are far more complex and mysterious than simple water sources. The Yucatan Peninsula is essentially a massive limestone platform with no surface rivers. Rainwater filters directly through the porous stone, creating an extensive network of underwater passages and chambers. Current explorations have mapped over 1,400 cenotes, but these represent just a fraction of what likely exists throughout the region. The mapped portions of these underwater cave systems stretch for hundreds of miles, making them some of the longest submerged cave networks on Earth. For the ancient Maya, cenotes were far more than water sources. They were sacred portals to Exabulba, the underworld. Archaeological evidence from cenotes includes elaborate offerings and human sacrifices, particularly during periods of severe drought when the Maya would appeal to the rain deity Chax through increasingly desperate rituals. Specialized cave divers have recovered artifacts that had remained untouched on the underwater cave floors for over 1,000 years: gold, jade, pottery, and the preserved remains of sacrificial victims. The water in many cenotes has unique properties that create spectacular visual effects. In some locations, fresh water from rainfall forms a distinct layer floating atop the denser salt water that infiltrates from the nearby ocean. The boundary between these layers, called a halocline, creates an eerie optical illusion. When divers pass through it, the water appears to ripple like the surface of a mirror, breaking apart and reforming. Light behaves differently above and below this boundary, creating surreal visual distortions that early Maya observers might have interpreted as supernatural phenomena. The cenotes also preserve an extraordinary record of ancient environments and extinct species. In 2007, cave divers discovered the nearly complete skeleton of a teenage girl who had died approximately 13,000 years ago, one of the oldest human remains ever found in the Americas. Named Nanaya by researchers. Her bones tell a story of a harsh life and early death, but also provide crucial DNA evidence about the first human populations to reach the Western Hemisphere. Alongside human remains, paleontologists have recovered bones from Ice Age animals, including giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, and gomphotheres, elephant-like creatures that disappeared from North America thousands of years ago. Perhaps most valuable to climate scientists, the cenotes contain a detailed chemical record of environmental conditions stretching back tens of thousands of years. Mineral deposits form with distinctive chemical signatures based on rainfall, temperature, and other factors at the time of their creation. By analyzing these formations, researchers can reconstruct ancient climate patterns with remarkable precision, helping us understand how our planet's systems have changed over time. The underwater passage systems connecting the cenotes remain largely unexplored, despite decades of effort by specialized cave diving teams. The challenges are immense, navigating through tight spaces with limited visibility, managing multiple gas tanks for extended dives, running guidelines to prevent becoming lost in labyrinthine passages. Cave diving is considered the most technically demanding and dangerous form of diving, requiring years of training and specialized equipment. Even with extensive preparation, dozens of divers have lost their lives attempting to map these underwater realms. Yet, despite the dangers, exploration continues to reveal new wonders. In 2018, divers discovered a connection between two previously mapped systems, confirming the existence of the largest underwater cave network in the world, the Sac-Actun system, with over 347 kilometers of mapped passages. And that's just what we've found so far. Geologists estimate that the actual extent of the Yucatan's underwater caves may be several times what has currently been mapped, with thousands of unexplored passages stretching beneath the jungle floor. From water-filled passages, let's travel to a place where fire and earth have combined to create one of the most unusual cave environments on our planet, the lava tubes of Iceland. Unlike limestone caves that form through the slow dissolution of rock by water, lava tubes are created in a matter of hours or days during volcanic eruptions. As lava flows from a volcano, the outer layer cools and hardens, while the hotter material inside continues to flow. When the eruption ends and the last of the molten rock drains out, it leaves behind a hollow tube, a perfect cast of the original lava river. Iceland's position on the mid-Atlantic ridge, the boundary where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates are pulling apart, makes it one of the most volcanically active places on Earth. This activity has created extensive networks of lava tubes throughout the country, with some of the most spectacular found near the Vatnajökull Glacier in the island's southeast. These tubes can reach remarkable dimensions, some with heights of 30 feet and widths exceeding 50 feet. Unlike the smooth water-carved walls of limestone caves, lava tubes feature dramatic flowing patterns frozen in stone, recording the last movements of the molten rock as it cooled. One of Iceland's most famous lava tubes, Rofárhólsshell, stretches for nearly a mile beneath the surface. Its ceiling features lava sickles formations created when the ceiling began to resolidify while dripping lava was still hanging from it. In winter, the entrance areas of Iceland's lava tubes transform into glittering ice palaces as water seeps in and freezes, creating columns of ice that seem to support the volcanic stone above. This juxtaposition of fire and ice, the country's defining elements, creates scenes of otherworldly beauty. The environmental conditions in lava tubes differ markedly from those in limestone caves. The volcanic rock maintains different temperature patterns and supports distinctive ecosystems. In some of Iceland's lava tubes, unique microbial communities have evolved to extract energy from the minerals in the volcanic rock rather than from organic matter. These chemolithotrophic organisms, literally rock-eating, represent some of the most extreme adaptations of life on our planet. Scientists studying these microbial communities aren't just interested in terrestrial biology, they're searching for insights into how life might exist on other worlds. The conditions in Iceland's lava tubes bear striking similarities to what we might expect to find on Mars, where extensive lava tube systems have been identified through satellite imagery. If life could adapt to these environments on Earth, perhaps similar adaptations might have occurred on the Red Planet during its more geologically active past. Lava tubes have practical significance for potential future human activities in space as well. On both the Moon and Mars, these natural shelters could provide protection from cosmic radiation, micrometeorite impacts, and extreme temperature fluctuations, all major challenges for establishing long-term human presence beyond Earth. Some of the most serious proposals for lunar habitats involve locating them within the extensive lava tube systems that we've identified through orbital observations. Back on Earth, Iceland's lava tubes continue to reveal new secrets. In 2020, Researchers using ground-penetrating radar identified previously unknown extensions to map systems, suggesting that the underground networks are far more extensive than previously recognized. Some of these newly discovered passages may have been sealed off from the surface for thousands of years, preserving pristine volcanic environments untouched by human influence. Let's now journey to a place where the underground world reveals some of its most colorful secrets, the Reed Flute Cave near Guilin, China. Known locally as the Palace of Natural Arts, this limestone cave has been a tourist attraction for over 1,200 years, with inscriptions on the walls dating back to the Tang Dynasty, 792 CE. The name comes from the reeds growing outside the cave entrance, which can be crafted into musical instruments. What makes Reed Flute Cave extraordinary is the incredible variety and vibrancy of its formations. Stalactites, stalagmites, columns, and curtains of flowstone take on shapes that have inspired poetic names over the centuries: Crystal Palace, Dragon Pagoda, Virgin Forest, and dozens more. The most famous chamber, known as Crystal Palace of the Dragon King, features a massive central column surrounded by formations that seem to cascade like frozen waterfalls from the ceiling high above. During the Second World War, the cave served as a refuge for people fleeing Japanese air raids on Guilin. Exploration during this period revealed additional chambers that had remained hidden for centuries. Modern visitors experience the cave very differently than those ancient Tang Dynasty scholars. Today's pathways are illuminated by multicolored lights that transform the natural stone into a kaleidoscopic fantasy landscape. While some purists argue that artificial lighting detracts from the natural beauty of cave systems, there's no denying the magical quality of Reed Flute Cave's illuminated chambers. The strategic placement of lights reveals details in the formations that would remain invisible to traditional torches or lanterns, allowing visitors to appreciate the incredible intricacy of structures that took millions of years to form. Each water droplet that contributed to these formations carried dissolved minerals from the rock above: calcite, aragonite, gypsum, depositing microscopic layers that accumulated over millennia into the massive structures we see today. Perhaps what's most remarkable about Reed Flute Cave is not just its natural beauty, but its place in Chinese cultural history. The cave represents one of the earliest examples of geotourism in human civilization, a place where people have deliberately journeyed for more than a millennium, specifically to experience the wonder of the underground world. Those Tang Dynasty inscriptions aren't just graffiti, they're poetry, philosophical observations, and artistic responses to the strange beauty of the subterranean realm. They represent a continuous thread of human experience connecting us directly to people who stood in the same spaces over 1,000 years ago, experiencing the same sense of wonder that modern visitors feel today. From ancient tourist attractions, let's move to one of the most recently discovered underground wonders, a place that remained completely unknown until the 21st century. Discovered in 2005 by a Vietnamese logger who took shelter from a rainstorm in a previously unnoticed entrance, Ben Avorng Cave, Paradise Cave in Phong Nha Kasbang National Park, has been described as the most beautiful cave formation in Asia. Paradise Cave stretches for over 31 kilometers beneath the jungle-covered mountains of central Vietnam. Its main chamber soars to heights of over 100 meters and stretches 150 meters wide, large enough to comfortably house an entire city block of buildings. What makes Paradise Cave particularly spectacular is the pristine quality of its formations. Massive stalagmites rising like ancient temples from the cave floor, delicate curtains of flowstone draped like petrified waterfalls from the walls, and crystalline pools of water, so still they create perfect mirror images of the formations above. The scale of Paradise Cave's formations exceeds what's found in most cave systems worldwide. Some of the stalagmites measure over 20 meters tall and 20 meters in circumference, dimensions that represent tens of thousands of years of continuous mineral deposition. Unlike many ancient caves that have experienced periods of dormancy due to climate changes, Paradise Cave appears to have maintained ideal conditions for formation growth throughout much of its million-year history. Only the first kilometer of Paradise Cave has been developed for general tourism, with elevated wooden walkways that protect the delicate cave floor while providing visitors safe access to view the most spectacular formations. Beyond this developed section, the cave continues for another 30 kilometers, accessible only to experienced cavers with proper equipment and guides. These deeper sections remain in pristine condition, with exploration carefully managed to minimize human impact on this fragile environment. The discovery of Paradise Cave highlights how much of our planet's underground realm likely remains unknown. This wasn't a small crack or minor cavern. It's one of the largest and most spectacular cave systems in the world, yet it remained completely undocumented until just a few years ago. In an age where we can map the surface of Mars with high-resolution imagery, there are still massive features beneath our feet that have never appeared on any human map. The Phong region that houses Paradise Cave represents one of the world's most significant karst landscapes, a type of terrain characterized by sinkholes, underground streams, and extensive cave systems formed in soluble rocks like limestone. The discovery of Paradise Cave prompted more intensive exploration of the surrounding area, leading to the identification of dozens of previously unknown caves and passages. Each new expedition seems to connect more dots on the underground map, suggesting that much of the region may be underlain by a vast interconnected network of caverns. This pattern of discovery, where finding one significant cave leads to the identification of entire networks, has repeated throughout the history of speleology. It reminds us that our understanding of the underground world remains fragmentary, at best. We've mapped the surface of our planet in exhaustive detail, yet the three-dimensional realm beneath that surface continues to hold countless secrets. From the limestone karst of Vietnam, let's travel to the high desert of New Mexico, where one of the most chemically unique cave environments on Earth has been evolving in isolation for millions of years. Lechuguilla Cave, located within Carlsbad Caverns National Park, remained obscure until 1986, when cavers broke through a previously terminal rubble pile and discovered a vast system that now ranks as the 8th longest cave in the world and the deepest in the continental United States. What makes Lechuguilla truly exceptional isn't its size but its contents. The cave features some of the most unusual formations ever discovered underground: massive gypsum chandeliers hanging from ceilings, delicate aragonite Christmas trees that seem to defy gravity, and perhaps, most famously, the Chandelier Ballroom, with its enormous crystal structures that stretch up to 6 meters in length. The diversity of mineral formations in Lechuguilla exceeds what has been found in almost any other cave system worldwide. But perhaps Lechuguilla's most significant feature is one invisible to the naked eye: its microbiology. The cave has been sealed off from the surface for between 4 and 7 million years, allowing microbial communities to evolve in complete isolation. These microorganisms have developed unique metabolic pathways, some capable of deriving energy from the cave's unusual chemistry, including some that can eat the manganese and iron in the rock walls. When scientists began studying these microbes, they made a startling discovery. Some of the bacteria in Lechuguilla demonstrated natural resistance to multiple antibiotics, despite having been isolated from the surface world for millions of years, long before humans developed these medications. This finding has significant implications for our understanding of antibiotic resistance, suggesting that many of these defense mechanisms evolved naturally in response to microbial warfare rather than being solely a reaction to human medical interventions. The scientific value of Lechuguilla is so great that access is strictly limited to research and survey teams. Unlike its famous neighbor Carlsbad Caverns, Lechuguilla has no developed tourist infrastructure and requires specialized permits for entry. Those fortunate enough to receive permission to enter must follow rigorous protocols to prevent contamination of this pristine environment. Special clothing, sterilized equipment, and careful movement techniques to minimize impact on delicate formations and microbial habitats. The conditions that created Lechuguilla's unique environment were exceptional. Unlike most caves, which are carved primarily by flowing water, Lechuguilla was formed largely through a process called sulfuric acid dissolution. Hydrogen sulfide gas rising from petroleum deposits deep below the cave reacted with groundwater to form sulfuric acid, which then dissolved the limestone to create the massive chambers and passages. This unusual chemistry contributed to the extraordinary mineral diversity found throughout the system. Lechuguilla continues to surprise researchers with each expedition. In 2012, a team discovered a new section of the cave containing pools of water that had been isolated from the outside world for between 10,000 and 100,000 years. These ancient waters contain microbial communities that had evolved independently from those in other parts of the cave, providing a unique opportunity to study parallel evolution in isolated environments. The expedition also extended the known length of the cave to over 138 miles, with no end in sight. From chemical wonders, let's move to historical mysteries and journey beneath the streets of Paris, where the famous catacombs represent one of humanity's most extensive rearrangements of the underground world. What began as limestone quarries, mines that provided the building stones for Paris's elegant buildings, became the final resting place for approximately 6 million people when the city's cemeteries became dangerously overcrowded in the late 18th century. Beginning in 1786, a massive operation began to transfer the contents of Paris's cemeteries to the abandoned quarries beneath the city. Night after night for more than 2 years, covered wagons transported human remains from graveyards to the quarry entrances. Priests would lead processions of these anonymous ancestors to their new resting place, conducting blessings as workers arranged the bones in the underground galleries. The scale of this undertaking is difficult to comprehend. Millions of individual people, their remains disinterred and relocated in what must have been a logistical nightmare, even by modern standards. The official catacombs open to tourists represent just a small fraction of what exists beneath Paris. The entire network of ancient quarries, known as Les Carrières de Paris, stretches for approximately 200 miles beneath the city. Most of these passages remain officially closed to the public, though that hasn't stopped a subculture of urban explorers known as cataphiles from illegally exploring the maze of tunnels, creating underground art galleries, hosting clandestine concerts, and even establishing secret swimming pools in larger chambers. The most famous section of the catacombs, open to tourists, features walls meticulously constructed from human femurs and skulls, creating geometric patterns and religious symbols. Stone plaques throughout the ossuary bear philosophical inscriptions about mortality and the equalizing nature of death. One of the most famous reads, Arrête, c'est ici l'empire de la mort. Stop, this is the empire of death, a somber greeting to visitors entering this underground memorial. The history of the Paris catacombs isn't limited to their function as an ossuary. During World War II, both the French resistance and German military utilized sections of the quarry network. The resistance established hidden bunkers and meeting spaces in areas that were difficult to access and not documented on official maps. Meanwhile, German forces constructed a bunker beneath the Lycée Montaigne, connecting it to the quarry system to create a protected underground headquarters. Even today, the catacombs occasionally create problems for modern Paris. The ancient mining operations removed massive amounts of stone from beneath the city, sometimes leaving insufficient support for the ground above. Periodic collapses have occurred throughout Paris's history, with streets and even buildings suddenly sinking as ancient quarry ceilings give way. The Inspection Générale des Carrières, General Inspection of Quarries, was established in 1777 and continues its work today, monitoring the stability of the quarries and reinforcing dangerous areas. The unauthorized exploration of Paris's underground has developed its own rich subculture and mythology. Cataphiles have created detailed maps of the network, marking secret entrances, dangerous areas, and notable features with their own system of codes. Some sections of the illegal catacombs have become famous among this community: the beach with imported sand and a mural of a seaside scene, the bunker with its collection of historical artifacts, or the library where books are stored in a relatively dry chamber. The tension between official prohibition and persistent exploration has created a cat-and-mouse game that has continued for generations. Police units, specifically tasked with catacomb patrol, colloquially known as cataflics, regularly sweep the tunnels, issuing fines to trespassers they catch. Yet the allure of this hidden world beneath the city ensures that the tradition of illicit exploration continues, with knowledge of access points and safe routes passed down among dedicated cataphiles. From the historical depths of Paris, let's travel to a place where the underground reveals some of its most surreal visual spectacles: the marble caves of Patagonia's General Carrera Lake. Straddling the border between Chile and Argentina, this remote lake houses a series of water-filled caves that demonstrate the extraordinary artistry of nature's patient hand. The marble caves, locally known as capillas de mármol or marble chapels, formed through a process spanning thousands of years. The cave system developed in a massive marble deposit, where the constant lapping of the lake's waves gradually eroded the stone, carving out smooth, undulating chambers that seem almost organic in their flowing forms. What makes these caves truly spectacular is the interaction between light, water, and the translucent quality of the marble itself. Unlike the absolute darkness of deep limestone caves, the marble caves are illuminated by sunlight filtering through the crystal-clear waters of General Carrera Lake. This light interaction creates an ever-changing display of blues and greens within the caves, with colors shifting throughout the day and across seasons as the angle of the sun and the mineral content of the water changes. During certain periods, the water takes on an intense turquoise hue that reflects onto the polished marble walls, creating the impression of being inside a living gemstone. The caves are only accessible by boat, requiring a journey across open water that can be challenging in the frequently windy conditions of Patagonia. This relative inaccessibility has helped preserve the formations, though increasing tourism in recent decades has brought more visitors to these remote chambers. Local boat operators now serve as unofficial guardians of the site, ensuring that tourists maintain a respectful distance from the delicate structures and don't damage the formations. What visitors see today represents just a moment in these caves' ongoing evolution. The erosion that created them continues unabated, with each small wave contributing to the reshaping of the marble. Geologists estimate that the visible portions of the caves began forming approximately 6,000 years ago, when water levels in the lake rose to their current position following the last ice age. This makes the marble caves relatively young in geological terms, living examples of processes that typically take place over much longer timeframes. The caves also serve as indicators of environmental change. Variations in water level, clarity, and mineral content, often resulting from human activities in the watershed, directly affect the appearance and ongoing development of the formations. In recent years, scientists have begun monitoring these parameters more closely, using the caves as a visual record of larger ecological shifts occurring throughout the region. From water-sculpted marble, let's venture to one of the world's most extreme underground environments, the Muval Cave in Romania, which remained completely sealed from the surface world for between 5.5 and 6 million years. Discovered accidentally in 1986, when workers drilling a shaft for a power plant broke through into a previously unknown void, Muval Cave represents one of the most significant biological discoveries of the 20th century. What makes Muval extraordinary isn't its physical features, but its ecosystem. The cave contains a subterranean lake with high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide, yet almost no oxygen. These toxic conditions would be lethal to most surface organisms, yet Muval teems with life, 48 species that exist nowhere else on Earth, comprising a food web that functions completely independently from the surface world. The base of this unique ecosystem isn't photosynthesis. There's no light for plants to utilize, but chemosynthesis. Bacteria in the cave water oxidize the hydrogen sulfide, using the energy from this chemical reaction, much like plants use energy from sunlight. These bacteria form floating mats on the water surface and coat the cave walls with a layer of slime that other creatures graze upon, beginning a food chain that supports the cave's larger inhabitants. Among Muval's unique residents are several species of spiders, pseudoscorpions, centipedes, leeches, and beetles, all adapted to the cave's extreme conditions. Many have lost their pigmentation and eyes through evolutionary processes, while developing enhanced senses of touch and vibration detection to navigate their perpetually dark home. Some have evolved to tolerate the toxic gases at concentrations that would be immediately dangerous to surface-dwelling relatives. The isolation of Muval Cave presents a natural evolutionary laboratory, a place where life has developed along a completely separate path for millions of years. The creatures here haven't interacted with their surface cousins since before humans existed as a species. They represent an extreme example of adaptive radiation, the process by which organisms diversify to fill available ecological niches, occurring in one of Earth's most constrained and challenging environments. Access to Muval is extremely restricted due to both its scientific importance and the hazardous atmosphere inside. Researchers must wear breathing apparatus and special protective clothing when entering the cave. Time inside is strictly limited to prevent contamination of this pristine ecosystem with microbes from the outside world. This protection is crucial, as introducing surface organisms could potentially devastate the unique life forms that have evolved in isolation for millions of years. The discovery of ecosystems like Muval has profoundly impacted our understanding of life's potential range. Before finding communities based on chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis, biologists generally assume that all ecosystems ultimately depended on sunlight as their primary energy source. Now we recognize that life can thrive in environments completely disconnected from the sun's energy. A realization with significant implications for the search for life on other worlds. From biological extremes, let's journey to a place where the underground serves as a canvas for some of humanity's earliest artistic expressions, the Cave of Lascaux in southwestern France. Discovered in 1940 by 4 teenage boys following their dog down a hole, Lascaux contains one of the most spectacular collections of Paleolithic art ever found, with over 600 paintings dating back approximately 17,000 years. The main chamber of Lascaux, known as the Hall of Bulls, features massive paintings of aurochs, an extinct species of wild cattle and horses, rendered with remarkable artistic skill. Some of these animal figures measure over 16 feet in length, dominating the cave walls with their dynamic poses and subtle shading. The artists who created these images developed sophisticated techniques, using natural contours in the rock to give their paintings a three-dimensional quality, preparing pigments from minerals like iron oxide and manganese, and creating primitive lamps to illuminate their work deep underground. What makes the Lascaux paintings particularly impressive is their artistic sophistication. These aren't crude stick figures, but carefully observed and skillfully rendered images showing understanding of animal anatomy, movement, and behavior. The artists use perspective and overlapping techniques to create depth, applied different pigments to achieve varied colors, and in some cases created specific mixtures to achieve particular hues. All of this was accomplished in the challenging conditions of a dark cave, working by the flickering light of stone lamps fueled by animal fat. Unfortunately, Lascaux's discovery and subsequent popularity led to its deterioration. After being opened to tourism in 1948, the cave began experiencing significant damage from the carbon dioxide, heat, and humidity introduced by thousands of visitors. A mysterious microbial growth known as white disease began appearing on the walls, threatening the ancient paintings. In 1963, the cave was closed to the public to prevent further damage, with access limited to only a few scientific researchers under strict protocols. To satisfy public interest without endangering the original cave, French authorities created Lascaux II, a meticulous replica of the major chambers located just a short distance from the original site. Later, Lascaux II was opened in 2016, an even more comprehensive recreation, incorporating cutting-edge technology to reproduce the entire cave system and its artwork with remarkable accuracy. These replicas allow visitors to experience the wonder of Lascaux while the original remains protected in isolation, slowly recovering from the damage caused by human visitation. The story of Lascaux highlights the delicate balance between sharing our underground heritage and preserving it for future generations. Many of the world's most significant cave art sites now limit access or provide alternative viewing experiences to prevent the irreversible damage that can occur when modern humans enter these ancient spaces. Even our breath, containing moisture and carbon dioxide, can trigger changes in the microclimate of a cave that has remained stable for thousands of years. The paintings at Lascaux and similar sites offer a direct connection to our distant ancestors, people who sought out the darkness beneath the earth to create images that would outlast their own lives by millennia. We can only speculate about their motivations. Were these sacred spaces where shamanic rituals took place? Were they teaching tools for young hunters? Were they simply expressions of creative impulse by artists captivated by the animals that dominated their world? The caves keep these secrets, revealing only the breathtaking results of ancient creative efforts. From prehistoric art galleries, let's descend into one of the world's most recently discovered natural wonders, Erhuangdong Cave in China. A system so vast it creates its own weather. First documented by a Western expedition in 2013, though likely known to local residents for generations, Erhuangdong features chambers of such immense size that they contain their own cloud formations. The scale of Erhuangdong defies easy comprehension. Its largest chamber, called the Cloud Ladder Hall, measures approximately 12.5 million cubic meters in volume, large enough to house a small skyscraper. When warm, humid air from outside meets the cooler air within these massive chambers, condensation occurs, forming clouds that hang beneath the distant ceiling. Explorers describe the surreal experience of walking through fog while underground, occasionally catching glimpses of the immense void around them when the mists momentarily clear. What makes Erhuangdong particularly remarkable is that despite its enormous size, it remained essentially undocumented in scientific literature until very recently. Local farmers had accessed portions of the cave for generations, collecting natural nitrate deposits used in fertilizer, but they typically ventured only into the entrance areas where these valuable minerals accumulated. The full extent of the system remained unexplored until cavers began systematic mapping expeditions in the early 2010s. The cave system continues to grow on the map with each expedition. Teams of international speleologists working with Chinese scientists have currently surveyed more than 42 kilometers of passages, with many leads still awaiting exploration. The complete system likely extends much further, potentially connecting with other known caves in the region to form an even more extensive network beneath China's Chongqing province. Erhuangdong also features extraordinary formations, massive flowstone draperies that hang like petrified waterfalls, delicate crystalline structures that sparkle in the beam of explorers' headlamps, and enormous stalagmites that rise like skyscrapers from the cave floor. Many of these formations show evidence of great age, having grown undisturbed for hundreds of thousands of years in the stable environment of the deep cave. The discovery of systems like Erhuangdong reminds us how much of our planet's underground realm remains unexplored. In an age of satellite mapping and GPS navigation, it's humbling to realize that features of this magnitude, large enough to have their own weather, can still await discovery. China's karst regions in particular likely house dozens or even hundreds of major cave systems that have never been fully documented, mapped, or studied. From cloud-filled chambers, let's venture to one of the most enigmatic underground structures created by human hands, the mysterious Derinkuyu that we mentioned earlier. But let's explore its most puzzling aspects. Among the many questions that surround this ancient underground city, perhaps the most persistent is why would its builders go to such extraordinary lengths to create a hidden world beneath the earth? Historical records suggest that Derinkuyu and similar underground cities in Cappadocia served as refuges during periods of invasion or religious persecution. The region experienced waves of conquest over centuries. Persian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, and various Islamic empires all controlled the area at different times. During these transitions, populations with minority religious beliefs often faced persecution, creating a strong motivation for developing secure hiding places. But Derinkuyu goes far beyond a simple hiding place. The engineering knowledge required to create such an extensive, habitable underground structure was extraordinary, ensuring ventilation throughout multiple levels, creating water systems that wouldn't contaminate living areas, and excavating chambers large enough for communal activities while leaving sufficient support to prevent collapse. All of this was accomplished without modern power tools, using only human labor and simple implements to slowly carve a habitable world from solid rock. Some researchers have proposed more speculative theories about Durinkuyu's purpose. A few suggest that it might have served as protection from extreme climate events, or even meteorological phenomena like extreme cold periods. Others point to ancient Hittite texts that mention cities of the underworld associated with religious practices, suggesting the underground complexes might have had ritual significance beyond their practical defensive purposes. What we do know is that Derinkuyu wasn't an isolated phenomenon. Archaeologists have identified at least 40 similar underground cities in the Cappadocia region, with evidence suggesting they were connected by tunnels stretching for miles. This wasn't a single community solution to a temporary problem, but rather a regional adaptation that developed over generations, a parallel world beneath the surface, where entire populations could vanish when threats appeared above. The design of these underground cities reveals sophisticated understanding of defense and psychology. Each level could be sealed off from those below by massive stone doors, circular slabs weighing up to a ton that could only be opened from the inside. Narrow passageways would force any attackers to move in single file, making them vulnerable to defenders. Ventilation shafts that brought fresh air into the depths were designed with security in mind, preventing enemies from using them as entry points or for chemical warfare tactics like smoke. Perhaps most remarkable is how these underground cities managed water resources. Derinkuyu features multiple wells dropping to the water table, but importantly, these wells weren't connected to the surface. They could only be accessed from within the underground city, preventing enemies from contaminating or controlling this crucial resource during a siege. Some wells connected different levels, creating a water distribution system throughout the community. Only about half of Derinkuyu has been excavated and open to visitors, with lower levels still awaiting proper archaeological study. This means that many of the city's secrets remain hidden, preserved in the darkness that has protected them for thousands of years. Each new section that archaeologists uncover provides additional clues about how people lived in this subterranean world, how they cooked without filling the chambers with smoke, how they disposed of waste, how they maintained psychological well-being in an environment without natural light. From ancient refuges, let's journey to a place where the underground reveals some of its most psychologically challenging aspects, the catacombs of Odessa, Ukraine, which form the longest tunnel network in the world. Extending for approximately 2,500 kilometers, this labyrinth of tunnels and chambers originated as limestone mines, with extraction beginning in the 19th century to build the city above. Unlike the catacombs of Paris or Rome, Odessa's underground maze never served as an official ossuary or burial place. However, its history is no less dramatic or macabre. During World War II, Soviet partisans used the catacombs as a base for resistance operations against Nazi occupiers. Small groups lived in the absolute darkness for months at a time, emerging only for sabotage missions against German forces. Archaeological evidence from this period includes improvised living quarters, weapon caches, and primitive medical stations where resistance fighters treated their wounded far from enemy eyes. The psychological challenge of existing in this environment was extreme. Imagine living in perpetual darkness, never seeing the sun, constantly aware that becoming lost in the unmapped sections could mean a slow death from dehydration. The partisan groups developed elaborate protocols to prevent members from becoming disoriented, rope systems, chalk markings, and strict rules about movement within the tunnels. Despite these precautions, stories persist of fighters who wandered away from camp and were never seen again, lost in the vast underground maze. Today, only a small section of the Odessa catacombs is officially open to tourism. The remainder exists in a legal gray area, not explicitly forbidden to enter, but dangerous enough that authorities discourage exploration. This hasn't stopped a subculture of diggers, urban explorers specialized in underground spaces from venturing into the unmapped portions, sometimes disappearing for days on self-supported expeditions into the maze. The danger is real. In 2005, a young woman became separated from her friends during a New Year's party in the catacombs. Her body wasn't discovered until 2007 when explorers came across her remains in a remote section. She had apparently wandered for days in the absolute darkness before succumbing to dehydration, unable to find her way back to an exit. This incident highlights the unforgiving nature of extensive underground systems. In the absence of light, even spaces relatively close to exits can become deadly traps for the disoriented. Despite these dangers, the catacombs continue to attract those drawn to the mystery of the underground world. Urban exploration groups have mapped substantial sections beyond the tourist areas, documenting historical artifacts, geological features, and evidence of the tunnel's various uses throughout history. Their efforts represent a grassroots approach to underground cartography, slowly expanding our knowledge of this vast subterranean network. The Odessa catacombs also demonstrate how underground spaces can develop their own distinct culture and mythology. Local legends tell of secret treasures hidden in remote chambers, of tunnels that connect to even deeper systems, never officially documented, and of strange encounters in the darkness. Whether factual or not, these stories have become part of the cultural fabric of Odessa, influencing how residents relate to the invisible maze beneath their streets. From human-created tunnels, let's venture to one of nature's most chemically bizarre underground environments, the Snotite Caves of Mexico, where the walls literally drip with living mucus. Located within the Cueva de Villa Luz, Cave of the Lighted House in Tabasco, Mexico, these chambers contain some of the most extreme microbial colonies ever discovered. The descriptively named snotites are colonies of bacteria that hang from cave ceilings and walls, in formations resembling mucus or snot. These living curtains consist primarily of bacteria from the genus Acidithiobacillus, organisms that derive energy by oxidizing sulfur compounds in the cave's atmosphere. As a byproduct of their metabolism, these bacteria create sulfuric acid, so concentrated that the pH of the liquid dripping from snotites can be as low as 0, comparable to battery acid. The cave environment that supports these unusual life forms is extraordinarily hostile to humans. Hydrogen sulfide gas seeps continuously from the surrounding rock, creating an atmosphere that requires explorers to wear gas masks and protective clothing. Without this equipment, exposure to the toxic air could lead to rapid unconsciousness and death. Yet despite these lethal conditions, the cave teems with specialized life forms that have adapted to, and in many cases depend upon, this extreme chemistry. Beyond the snotites, Villa Luz contains streams with unusual properties resulting from this unique chemistry. Some watercourses are so acidic they can dissolve standard equipment, yet they support populations of specialized fish that have evolved to tolerate these conditions. These extremophile fish represent a remarkable example of adaptation, their bodies developing mechanisms to neutralize acid levels that would immediately kill their surface-dwelling relatives. Researchers studying Villa Luz must contend not only with its toxic atmosphere, but also with the corrosive nature of the environment itself. Standard research equipment can be damaged or destroyed by the acidic conditions, requiring specialized tools and protective cases. Even the rock of the cave itself bears witness to these extreme conditions. In many areas, the limestone has been converted to gypsum through reaction with the sulfuric acid produced by microbial activity. The scientific significance of environments like Villa Luz extends beyond Earth. Astrobiologists study these systems as potential analogs for the conditions that might exist on other worlds, particularly Mars, where evidence suggests that subsurface environments with similar chemistry might have existed, or perhaps still exist. If life can thrive in the toxic conditions of an acid cave on Earth, perhaps similar adaptations could allow organisms to survive in seemingly inhospitable extraterrestrial environments. From acidic extremes, let's journey to one of the most visually stunning underground environments ever discovered, Hang Son Doong in Vietnam, which we touched on earlier but deserves a deeper exploration. First surveyed in 2009, Son Doong is currently recognized as the world's largest cave passage by volume, so vast that it defies easy comprehension even for experienced cavers. The statistics alone are staggering. Son Doong's main passage stretches more than 5 kilometers in length, with ceiling heights reaching 200 meters, tall enough to accommodate an entire Manhattan skyscraper. At its widest, the passage measures 150 meters across, creating a void of such magnitude that it seems more like an underground valley than a traditional cave. The total volume of the main passage exceeds 38.5 million cubic meters, large enough to comfortably house an entire New York City block. But what truly sets Son Doong apart are its dull lines, massive ceiling collapses that have created skylights to the world above. These openings have allowed sunlight to penetrate the depths, supporting the growth of entire forests on the cave floor. Standing in these chambers, explorers describe the surreal experience of seeing clouds form below the distant ceiling and rain falling inside the cave, a complete weather system developing in this underground world. The scale of Son Doong creates optical illusions that challenge human perception. Explorers describe the disorienting experience of losing all sense of scale inside the main chambers, massive stalagmites that appear to be just a few meters tall until a human figure stands beside them, revealing that they actually soar to heights of 80 meters or more. Without familiar reference points, the brain struggles to accurately interpret the vastness of these spaces. Access to Son Doong remains strictly limited to preserve its pristine condition. Only one tour company has permission to bring visitors, with groups limited to 10 people and advance bookings required years in advance. The journey isn't for casual tourists. Reaching the cave entrance requires a 2-day jungle trek, followed by a rappel of 80 meters just to enter the system. Once inside, visitors camp underground for several nights as they traverse the massive chambers. What's particularly remarkable about Sundong is that it remained essentially unknown to the outside world until very recently. Local man Hokan discovered the entrance in 1991 while hunting in the jungle, but the sound of rushing water and the strong wind emanating from the opening discouraged him from entering. It wasn't until he led British cavers to the site in 2009 that the true scale of the discovery became apparent. This raises an intriguing question. How many other world-class cave systems might still await discovery in remote regions? The formation of Sundong required an extraordinary sequence of geological events. Researchers believe the initial cave developed along a fault line in limestone between 2 and 5 million years ago. Underground rivers gradually carved out the passage, while periodic ceiling collapses created the massive chambers and skylight entrances we see today. The process continues. Geologists monitoring the cave have documented ongoing erosion and occasional rockfalls that continue to shape this dynamic environment. From natural cathedrals, let's venture to places where the underground has been shaped by the strangest architect of all time itself. In various locations around the world, cave systems have preserved evidence of ancient events in ways that nothing on the surface could match. These time capsules offer unique windows into Earth's distant past, preserving information that would have been erased by erosion, weather, and biological activity in surface environments. In Jewel Cave, South Dakota, one of the longest cave systems in the world, with over 200 miles of mapped passages, scientists have discovered unusual formations called hydromagnesite balloons. These delicate mineral bubbles, some as thin as a soap bubble, have survived untouched for thousands of years in protected alcoves. On the surface, they would have disintegrated within days from wind, rain, or even the slightest touch. Yet in the stable environment of the deep cave, they persist as perfect records of atmospheric conditions from ancient times. In the caves of Gibraltar, archaeologists have discovered Neanderthal artwork and evidence of habitation that has remained unchanged since our evolutionary cousins disappeared approximately 40,000 years ago. These sites were protected from weather and scavenging animals that would have destroyed similar evidence at surface sites, providing unprecedented insight into Neanderthal behavior and capabilities. The very air trapped in some of these sealed chambers contains a mixture of gases different from our modern atmosphere, offering a direct sample of what our planet's atmosphere contained in prehistory. Perhaps the most impressive time capsules are found in caves containing ancient ice. In some high-altitude or high-latitude cave systems, ice formations have persisted for hundreds of thousands of years, preserving atmospheric samples, pollen, and even ancient microorganisms in their frozen layers. Scientists drilling ice cores from these formations can reconstruct climate records, extending back beyond the reach of traditional ice cores from glaciers or ice sheets, which rarely exceed 800,000 years in age. The preservation properties of caves extend to biological specimens as well. In Naracoorte Caves in Australia, a 500,000-year record of extinct animals has been preserved in remarkable condition. Animals that fell into vertical shafts accumulated in chambers below, their remains protected from decomposition by the stable cave environment. These fossils include complete skeletons of species long vanished from the surface world, providing unprecedented insight into Australia's extinct megafauna and how they changed as the continent's climate shifted over hundreds of millennia. The time-preserving properties of caves have practical applications for modern science as well. Researchers studying antibiotic resistance have turned to isolated cave systems to collect bacteria that have been separated from surface populations for millions of years. By examining how these ancient lineages respond to modern antibiotics, scientists gain insight into whether resistance is a new phenomenon driven by human medical practices or a natural feature of bacterial populations that predates our species. Even the growth patterns of cave formations themselves serve as time capsules. The layers in stalagmites and flowstone record detailed information about ancient rainfall patterns, with each microscopic layer preserving chemical signatures that indicate temperature, precipitation amounts, and even dominant vegetation types on the surface above. By analyzing these growth layers, similar to tree rings but potentially spanning millions of years, paleoclimatologists can reconstruct climate records with remarkable precision. The preservation properties of caves have also benefited archaeology. The stable temperature and humidity in many cave environments have preserved organic materials that would have quickly decomposed in surface conditions. In caves throughout the American Southwest, archaeologists have recovered intact textiles, wooden tools, and plant remains from ancient indigenous cultures, materials that rarely survive at open-air sites. These preserved items provide unprecedented insight into daily life and technological capabilities of cultures that left few written records. From natural time capsules, let's explore some of the most unusual life forms that have adapted to the unique challenges of underground existence. Cave-adapted organisms, known collectively as troglobites, represent some of the most specialized creatures on our planet, with adaptations so extreme they sometimes barely resemble their surface-dwelling relatives. Perhaps the most visually striking adaptation is the loss of pigmentation. Many cave-dwelling animals appear ghost white or translucent, having lost the melanin that colors their surface cousins. Without light, there's no evolutionary advantage to maintaining skin pigments that protect against UV radiation or provide camouflage against visual predators. Over generations, these creatures have stopped investing metabolic energy in producing unnecessary pigments, resulting in their distinctive pallid appearance. The most famous adaptation, however, is the reduction or complete loss of eyes. In the absolute darkness of deep caves, vision provides no survival advantage, and eyes represent a metabolic cost and potential vulnerability. Through evolutionary processes, many cave species have reduced their eyes to vestigial structures or lost them entirely. The Mexican blind cavefish, Astyanax mexicanus, provides a fascinating example of this process in action. Different populations of this species show various stages of eye reduction, from slightly smaller eyes to completely eyeless individuals. To compensate for the loss of vision, troglobites typically develop enhanced alternative senses. Many cave-adapted arthropods have extraordinarily long antennae or appendages covered with sensitive hairs that detect the slightest air movements or vibrations. Some blind cavefish have developed pressure-sensitive organs along their bodies that can detect the displacement of water caused by objects or other fish, essentially seeing their environment through pressure waves. The metabolic adaptations of cave organisms are equally impressive. Many troglobites have significantly slower metabolism than their surface relatives, allowing them to survive in environments where food sources are scarce and unpredictable. Some cave salamanders can survive for years without eating, their bodies entering a state of extremely low metabolic activity during periods when food isn't available. Perhaps the most extreme adaptations are found in creatures living in cave environments with unusual chemistry. In hydrogen sulfide-rich caves like Mexico's Cueva de Villa Luz, specialized fish have evolved mechanisms to detoxify the poisonous compounds that would kill most aquatic organisms. These fish essentially live in water that would be considered severely polluted by surface standards, yet they thrive through specialized biochemical pathways that neutralize the toxic compounds. Some cave ecosystems operate on energy sources completely independent of the sun, a rarity on our photosynthesis-dominated planet. In systems like Romania's Moval Cave, the base of the food chain consists of chemosynthetic bacteria that derive energy from chemical reactions involving hydrogen sulfide and other compounds. These bacteria support entire ecosystems that have evolved in complete isolation from the surface world, with energy flowing not from sunlight but from the chemical bonds of inorganic molecules. What makes these adaptations particularly fascinating to evolutionary biologists is that they represent examples of convergent evolution, the process where organisms not closely related develop similar traits because they live in similar environments. Cave animals from different lineages around the world have independently evolved similar adaptations to underground life, losing pigmentation and eyes, developing enhanced non-visual senses, and slowing metabolism. The cave environment is so demanding, so specific in its challenges, that it shapes life according to strict parameters, regardless of where that life began. From the biological to the cultural, let's explore how underground spaces have shaped human mythology, religion, and psychology throughout our history. Across cultures and time periods, the subterranean world has occupied a special place in our collective imagination, sometimes feared, sometimes revered, but always recognized as a realm fundamentally different from our everyday surface existence. In Greek mythology, the underworld, the realm of Hades, was a physical place beneath the earth, where souls journeyed after death. The Romans similarly conceptualized their underworld, with Virgil's Aeneid describing Aeneas's journey through elaborate underground chambers on his visit to the realm of the dead. These weren't simply abstract spiritual domains, but were understood as actual physical places existing beneath the ground, accessible through certain caves that served as gateways between worlds. Native American traditions across various tribes incorporated underground realms into their creation myths. The Hopi believed their ancestors emerged from a series of underground worlds before arriving in the current world. Each subterranean realm represented a different stage of existence, with humanity progressing through these stages by ascending through openings to higher levels. The Navajo similarly described the first people emerging from lower worlds through a hollow reed that connected the underground realms to the surface. In Norse mythology, Svartalfheim, the realm of the Dark Elves, existed as an underground kingdom. The dwarves, master craftsmen who created many of the gods' most powerful tools and weapons, dwelled beneath mountains in vast subterranean forges. These underground beings were associated with transformation, turning raw materials into objects of power and beauty through their hidden knowledge and skills. The psychological impact of underground spaces appears consistently throughout human history. Caves and other subterranean environments have served as sites for initiation rituals, vision quests, and religious ceremonies across diverse cultures. The sensory deprivation experienced in deep caves, the absolute darkness, the silence, the constant temperature, the disorientation creates altered states of consciousness that many traditional societies interpreted as spiritual experiences. Archaeological evidence from prehistoric cave sites suggests that the underground served special ceremonial functions from our earliest history. The most spectacular prehistoric cave art rarely appears near cave entrances where people lived, but is typically found deep in the most inaccessible chambers. This suggests these spaces weren't simply convenient canvases but were specifically chosen for their profound separation from the everyday world. The journey through darkness to reach these painted chambers may have been as significant as the images themselves, a physical enactment of the journey between ordinary and non-ordinary states of consciousness. Even in modern secular societies, we retain psychological associations with the underground that influence our thinking and culture. We speak of buried emotions, unearthing secrets, or excavating memories, metaphors that link psychological depth with physical depth beneath the earth. Contemporary horror fiction and cinema frequently use subterranean settings, basements, tunnels, caves to evoke primal fears of the unknown and unseen. Despite our scientific understanding of geology and speleology, something about the underground continues to resonate with the deepest layers of our psychology. From collective mythology, let's descend to one of Earth's most newly discovered underground frontiers, the extensive subsurface biosphere that scientists have only begun to comprehend in recent decades. Beneath the familiar surface ecosystems of our planet lies a vast living world that may actually contain the majority of Earth's biomass, operating according to timescales and energy cycles drastically different from those we observe above ground. Recent scientific investigations have revealed that life extends far deeper into Earth's crust than previously imagined. Microorganisms have been recovered from oil wells more than 5 kilometers deep and from core samples taken from beneath the ocean floor at similar depths. These aren't just dormant spores or contamination, they're active, reproducing communities of organisms adapted to conditions of extreme pressure, temperature, and nutrient scarcity. What's particularly astonishing about the deep biosphere is its sheer scale. Based on current estimates, the combined mass of all subsurface microorganisms may equal or exceed the biomass of all plant and animal life on the surface. These invisible communities, operating beyond the reach of sunlight, represent a massive component of Earth's biosphere that remained essentially unknown to science until the late 20th century. The organisms inhabiting this realm operate on timescales that challenge our understanding of biological processes. Some deep subsurface microbes appear to divide only once every few hundred or even thousand years, metabolic rates so slow they barely register as alive by conventional standards. Yet these organisms persist, maintaining essential cellular functions and repairing DNA damage over timeframes that span multiple human generations. The energy sources supporting this hidden biosphere differ fundamentally from those powering surface ecosystems. Without access to sunlight, deep subsurface communities cannot rely on photosynthesis as their primary energy input. Instead, many derive energy from chemical reactions involving hydrogen, methane, reduced iron, or sulfur compounds. Others appear to metabolize organic carbon that seeped down from the surface, millions of years ago preserved in ancient sediments, essentially living on fossil food deposited during earlier geological eras. This vast subterranean biosphere plays crucial roles in global geochemical cycles that we're only beginning to understand. Deep microbes influence the composition of groundwater, contribute to the formation of certain mineral deposits, and may even affect the behavior of fault zones and the generation of certain hydrocarbon resources. Their metabolic activities over geological timescales have literally shaped the chemical composition of our planet. The discovery of Earth's deep biosphere has profound implications for our search for life beyond our planet. If life can thrive kilometers beneath Earth's surface, utilizing energy sources completely independent of sunlight, then similar subsurface environments on other worlds become potential habitats worth investigating. Mars, Europa, and Enceladus all possess subsurface regions that might support similar microbial ecosystems, protected from harsh surface conditions by layers of rock or ice. For microscopic life forms, let's shift our attention to one of the most visually dramatic underground environments on Earth, the ice caves of Iceland's Vatnajökull Glacier. These ephemeral crystal palaces form where geothermal heat, and volcanic activity beneath the massive ice cap create void spaces within the frozen mass, sculpting chambers of extraordinary beauty that transform with each passing season. Unlike traditional rock caves that may remain stable for millions of years, ice caves are dynamic environments that can form, change, and disappear within a single year. They're created when summer meltwater carves channels through the glacier, which then partially refreeze during winter, leaving behind tunnels and chambers of crystalline blue ice. Each cave is unique, shaped by the specific conditions of water flow, temperature fluctuation, and ice composition in its particular location. What makes these ice caves so visually striking is their interaction with light. Ice has the remarkable property of absorbing red and yellow wavelengths of light, while allowing blue wavelengths to penetrate and scatter within its structure. This creates the distinctive blue glow that seems to emanate from within the ice itself, as if the walls were illuminated from the inside. The effect is most pronounced in the densest, oldest ice, where years of compression have squeezed out air bubbles that would otherwise reflect light. Entering an ice cave means stepping into a realm of constant change and movement. Unlike the static stability of rock caves, ice caves are never truly still. The ice creaks and groans as it shifts, water drips from melting ceiling formations, and subtle currents of air cause delicate ice crystals to grow and reshape themselves continuously. What visitors see on any given day is a momentary snapshot of an environment in constant flux. The cathedral-like beauty of these spaces belies their inherent danger. Ice caves are among the most hazardous environments for explorers and require experienced guides with intimate knowledge of glacial behavior. Collapse is an ever-present risk, particularly during warmer periods when melting weakens the structural integrity of the ice. Many caves that exist one season are completely gone, the next having collapsed or been remodeled beyond recognition by the flowing ice. Iceland's ice caves also offer a sobering window into our changing climate. Guides who have worked with these formations for decades report that many caves are becoming less stable and have shorter accessible seasons as global temperatures rise. The glaciers themselves are retreating, with Vatnajökull losing significant mass in recent decades. Each disappearing ice cave represents not just the loss of a beautiful natural formation, but also tangible evidence of larger environmental changes reshaping our planet. Despite these challenges, the ice caves continue to attract visitors drawn to their otherworldly beauty and ephemeral nature. There's a philosophical aspect to experiencing these spaces, a recognition that you're witnessing something that exists only briefly in its current form, never to be seen exactly the same way again. It's a physical manifestation of impermanence, a quality that seems particularly poignant in environments sculpted from frozen water. From ephemeral ice to ancient salt, let's explore one of the world's most unusual underground environments, the Wieliczka salt mine near Krakow, Poland. Active from the 13th century until commercial operations ceased in 2007, this UNESCO World Heritage Site represents one of humanity's most ambitious and long-running interactions with the underground realm. What makes Wieliczka extraordinary isn't just its age or size, though at over 700 years of continuous operation and with passages stretching for 287 kilometers, it's impressive on both counts. What truly sets it apart is how generations of miners transformed this industrial space into an underground world of art, spirituality, and culture. Over centuries, miners carved elaborate chapels, statues, reliefs, and decorative elements directly from the salt rock, creating a subterranean complex that blurs the line between mine and cathedral. The most spectacular example is the Chapel of St. Kinga, a vast underground church measuring 54 meters long, 18 meters wide, and 12 meters high, all carved entirely from salt. Everything in the chapel, the altar, the religious statues, the floor tiles, even the chandeliers, consists of salt crystal. The acoustics in this space are exceptional, and it continues to host concerts and religious services today, more than 100 meters beneath the surface. The salt itself gives Wieliczka unique properties not found in conventional caves or mines. The walls have a subtle glow that reflects light differently than ordinary rock, creating an atmosphere that visitors frequently describe as otherworldly. The air within the mine contains high concentrations of salt aerosols, creating a microclimate that has been used therapeutically for respiratory conditions since the 19th century. A specialized treatment facility within the mine continues this tradition, with patients spending extended periods underground as part of their therapy. The historical significance of Wieliczka extends beyond its artistic treasures. For centuries, salt was an essential commodity used not just for flavoring food, but as a critical preservative in an era before refrigeration. The mine was so valuable that it provided up to 1/3 of the Polish crown's income during certain periods. Control of salt production was control of an essential resource, making Wieliczka a site of enormous economic and political importance throughout European history. What visitors see today represents only a fraction of the full mine complex. Of the nearly 300 kilometers of passages created during 7 centuries of operation, only about 2% is open to tourism. The remainder continues to be monitored and maintained to prevent collapse or flooding, an enormous engineering challenge that continues despite the end of commercial mining operations. Some deeper or less stable sections have been deliberately filled or allowed to flood as part of the mine's long-term stabilization plan. Wieliczka provides a unique example of how human interaction with the underground can evolve over time. What began as purely extractive, taking a valuable resource from beneath the earth, gradually transformed into creative expression, spiritual practice, and eventually cultural preservation and tourism. The miners who carved religious scenes into the salt walls weren't just decorating their workplace. They were creating a parallel world beneath the earth where their values, beliefs, and artistic impulses could find physical expression. From human-transformed spaces, let's venture to one of the world's most chemically unusual natural cave systems, Lechuguilla Cave in New Mexico's Carlsbad Caverns National Park. Hidden beneath the desert surface, Lechuguilla remained essentially unknown until 1986, when cavers broke through a boulder choke that had sealed the cave for thousands of years. What they discovered beyond this natural barrier would transform our understanding of speleology and underground ecosystems. Lechuguilla currently extends for more than 138 miles of surveyed passages, making it the 8th longest cave in the world and the deepest limestone cave in the United States. But what makes it truly exceptional isn't its size, but its contents. The cave features mineral formations that exist nowhere else on Earth. Massive gypsum chandeliers hanging from ceilings, delicate aragonite Christmas trees that seem to defy gravity, and rare minerals like rusticles, pool fingers, and U-loops that have helped geologists develop new understandings of underground chemical processes. What created this underground chemical laboratory was an unusual formation process. Unlike most caves, which are carved primarily by flowing water, Lechuguilla was formed largely through a process called sulfuric acid dissolution. Hydrogen sulfide gas rising from petroleum deposits deep below the cave reacted with groundwater to form sulfuric acid, which then dissolved the limestone to create massive chambers and passages. This aggressive chemical environment led to the creation of mineral formations that seem almost alien in their structure and composition. The scientific value of Lechuguilla is so great that access is strictly limited to research and survey teams. Unlike nearby Carlsbad Caverns, Lechuguilla has no developed tourist infrastructure and requires specialized permits for entry. Those fortunate enough to receive permission to enter must follow rigorous protocols to prevent contamination of this pristine environment, special clothing, sterilized equipment, and careful movement techniques to minimize impact on delicate formations and microbial habitats. One of Lechuguilla's most significant contributions to science came from an unexpected direction: medicine. When microbiologists began studying bacteria collected from the cave, they discovered organisms with natural resistance to multiple antibiotics, despite having been isolated from the surface world for millions of years. This finding has significant implications for our understanding of antibiotic resistance, suggesting that many resistance mechanisms evolved naturally as part of microbial warfare, long before humans developed antibiotic drugs. The cave continues to grow on the map with each research expedition. Teams routinely discover new passages and chambers, expanding our understanding of this vast system. What's particularly remarkable is that after more than 3 decades of systematic exploration, cavers continue to find major extensions with no end in sight. The full extent of Lechuguilla remains unknown, with numerous leads still awaiting investigation by future expeditions. The story of Lechuguilla also highlights the importance of conservation ethics in cave exploration. For decades before the breakthrough in 1986, cavers had suspected that significant passages might exist beyond the rubble-filled entrance pit. However, the digging efforts proceeded slowly and carefully, with meticulous attention to minimizing impact on the cave environment. This cautious approach allowed the pristine condition of the cave beyond the entrance to be preserved until proper protocols could be established for its study and protection. From chemical wonders, let's turn to historical mysteries and explore one of the world's most enigmatic underground structures, the cryptic tunnel system beneath the ancient city of Derinkoyu in Turkey. While we touched on this remarkable site earlier, some of its most puzzling aspects deserve closer examination. Why would ancient people invest such enormous effort in creating a hidden world beneath the earth? And what can these underground cities tell us about the societies that built them? Archaeological evidence suggests that Derinkoyu's underground city could accommodate up to 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food stores. The engineering knowledge required to create such a space was extraordinary, ensuring proper ventilation throughout multiple levels, creating water systems that wouldn't contaminate living areas, and excavating chambers large enough for communal activities, while leaving sufficient support to prevent collapse. All of this was accomplished without modern power tools, using only human labor and simple implements to slowly carve a habitable world from solid rock. The defensive aspects of Kuyu reveal sophisticated understanding of security principles. Each level could be sealed off from the ones below by massive stone doors, circular slabs weighing up to a ton that could only be opened from the inside. Narrow passageways would force any attackers to move in single file, making them vulnerable to defenders. Ventilation shafts that brought fresh air into the depths were designed with security in mind, preventing enemies from using them as entry points or for chemical warfare tactics like smoke. What would daily life have been like in such a place? Historical accounts suggest that the underground cities weren't permanent residences, but rather temporary refuges during periods of invasion or religious persecution. Still, evidence indicates that people sometimes lived below ground for months at a time, maintaining a semblance of normal society in these artificial caverns. Imagine being a child growing up during such times, perhaps experiencing extended periods where the sun was just a distant memory, where your entire world was defined by torchlit stone walls and the sounds of an entire community echoing through tunnels. The psychological impact of extended underground habitation must have been significant. Research on modern populations living in limited light conditions shows pronounced effects on circadian rhythms, hormone production, and mental health. How did the ancient inhabitants of Koyu manage these challenges? Archaeological evidence suggests they developed specific cultural practices to maintain psychological well-being, communal spaces for gathering, areas designated for different activities, and systems to track time despite the absence of natural daylight cues. Perhaps most intriguing is that Koyu wasn't an isolated phenomenon. Archaeologists have identified at least 40 similar underground cities in the Cappadocia region, with evidence suggesting they were connected by tunnels stretching for miles. This wasn't a single community solution to a temporary problem, but rather a regional adaptation that developed over generations, a parallel world beneath the surface, where entire populations could vanish when threats appeared above. The mystery deepens when we consider that only about half of Kuyu has been excavated and open to visitors, with lower levels still awaiting proper archaeological study. This means that many of the city's secrets remain hidden, preserved in the darkness that has protected them for thousands of years. Each new section that archaeologists uncover provides additional clues about how people lived in this subterranean world, how they cooked without filling the chambers with smoke, how they disposed of waste, how they maintained psychological well-being in an environment without natural light. From ancient underground cities, let's venture to one of the most visually spectacular cave systems on our planet, Waitomo glowworm caves on New Zealand's North Island. What makes Waitomo extraordinary isn't its size or geological features, but rather its living inhabitants, thousands of bioluminescent insects that transform ordinary limestone chambers into a living galaxy of blue-green stars. The glowworms of Waitomo aren't actually worms at all, but the larvae of a species of fungus gnat Arachnocampa luminosa, endemic to New Zealand. These insects spend most of their life cycle in the larval stage, attaching themselves to the cave ceiling and producing a blue-green light through a chemical reaction involving luciferin, the same compound that creates the glow of fireflies. The light serves a deadly purpose, attracting flying insects into sticky threads that the larvae lower from the ceiling, essentially fishing for their prey in the darkness. Entering the main glowworm grotto at Waitomo is an experience often described as otherworldly. Visitors typically travel by boat along the underground river, moving in perfect silence through darkness broken only by the constellations of living light on the ceiling above. With all artificial lights extinguished, the illusion of floating through a star field becomes complete, thousands of tiny blue points of light reflecting in the still water below, creating the sensation of drifting through space rather than traveling underground. What makes this display particularly remarkable is its connection to the broader ecosystem. The glowworms depend on flying insects for food, which in turn require the vegetation outside the cave. The underground river connects to surface waterways, bringing in nutrients and occasionally new organisms. The entire display, one of the most magical natural phenomena on Earth, exists because of these delicate ecological connections between the surface world and the subterranean environment. The Maori people knew about the Waitomo caves long before European settlers arrived in New Zealand. The name itself combines two Maori words, wai meaning water and tomo meaning entrance or hole. Local Maori guides were the first to show the caves to outsiders in the late 19th century, beginning with local surveyor Fred Mace and Chief Tane Tainarau, who explored the lower reaches by raft in 1887. Their descendants continue to serve as guardians and guides for the cave system today. The management of Waitomo represents an interesting balance between tourism and conservation. The caves receive hundreds of thousands of visitors annually, creating significant economic benefits for the region. However, this human presence poses potential threats to the delicate cave environment. Careful monitoring of carbon dioxide levels, temperature, and humidity helps protect the glowworm population, with visitor numbers limited when necessary to maintain appropriate conditions. Photography is prohibited in the main glowworm chambers, both to prevent light disturbance to the insects and to preserve the magical experience for visitors. Beyond the famous glowworm display, the Waitomo region contains more than 300 known limestone caves, many with their own unique features. Some contain massive stalactites and stalagmites that have been growing for hundreds of thousands of years. Others feature underground waterfalls or rare mineral formations. Only a small percentage are open to tourism, with many of the more fragile or scientifically valuable sites protected from general access. From living lights, let's journey to one of the most unusual cave systems in North America, the maze-like network of Sac-Actun in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. In 2018, after years of exploration, divers confirmed that Sac-Actun had connected with another major system called Dos Ojos, creating what is now the longest known underwater cave system in the world. This submerged labyrinth stretches for more than 370 kilometers beneath the jungle floor, with new passages still being discovered. What makes Sac-Actun particularly significant isn't just its vast extent, but its dual nature as both a geological wonder and an archaeological treasure trove. The crystal clear waters that fill these passages have preserved artifacts and remains that would have deteriorated in most other environments. Explorers have discovered everything from ancient Maya pottery and stone tools to the remains of extinct animals like giant sloths and gomphotheres, elephant-like creatures that disappeared from the Americas at the end of the last ice age. Perhaps the most dramatic discoveries have been human remains, including some of the oldest ever found in the Americas. In 2007, divers discovered the nearly intact skeleton of a teenage girl who died approximately 13,000 years ago, a find later named Nanea. Her bones tell a story of a harsh life and early death, but also provide crucial DNA evidence about the first human populations to reach the Western Hemisphere. The underwater environment preserved her remains in remarkable condition, allowing scientists to extract genetic material that would have degraded in most surface sites. Exploring Sac-Actun requires specialized training and equipment beyond what's needed for conventional cave diving. The passages twist and narrow unpredictably, with some restrictions barely wide enough for a diver with tanks to squeeze through. Visibility can change dramatically when divers pass through haloclines, the boundaries where fresh water from rainfall floats atop denser saltwater that is infiltrated from the nearby ocean. These conditions create unique challenges that have claimed the lives of numerous divers despite extensive preparation and equipment. For the ancient Maya, the cenotes that connect to this underwater system weren't just water sources, but sacred sites associated with Sakik, the rain deity, and portals to Exabulba, the underworld. Archaeological evidence from cenotes throughout the region includes elaborate offerings and human sacrifices, particularly during periods of severe drought, when the Maya would appeal to the rain deity through increasingly desperate rituals. The cenotes' connection to both practical survival water and spiritual beliefs made them central features in Maya settlements and cosmology. The Sac-Actun system also preserves a detailed record of environmental change. By analyzing sediment layers and speleothems, cave formations in the dry portions of the cave, scientists can reconstruct ancient climate patterns with remarkable precision. This information helps us understand how the Maya civilization responded to changing environmental conditions, including extended drought periods that may have contributed to the collapse of their classic civilization around 900 CE. The ongoing exploration of Sac-Actun highlights how much of our planet's underground realm remains unmapped. Despite decades of systematic exploration by teams of specialized cave divers, new passages and chambers continue to be discovered with each expedition. The complete extent of this underwater maze remains unknown, with the possibility that it connects to still more systems to form an even more extensive network beneath the Yucatan Peninsula. From underwater labyrinths, let's travel to a place where the underground world merges with human spiritual practices in one of the most elaborate ways imaginable, the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, Ethiopia. Unlike traditional cave sites that were adapted for human use, these extraordinary structures were created by excavating downward from the surface, carving complete churches from solid volcanic rock. The 11 monolithic churches of Lalibela weren't built by stacking stones, but rather by removing them, starting at the surface and carefully excavating downward to reveal complete structures with doors, windows, columns, and intricate decorative elements. Some extend as deep as 40 feet into the solid rock, with their roofs remaining at ground level. Trenches and tunnels connect the churches, creating an underground spiritual complex that has remained in continuous use for worship since its creation in the 12th century. What makes these structures particularly remarkable is their architectural sophistication. The largest, Bet Medhain Alam, measures 33.5 meters long, 23.5 meters wide, and 11.5 meters deep, all carved from a single piece of rock. The interior features precisely rendered columns, arches, and vaulted ceilings that would be impressive achievements even in conventional construction. To create these elements by removing stone rather than assembling it represents an extraordinary feat of three-dimensional planning and execution. According to Ethiopian tradition, King Lalibela commissioned these churches after a vision in which he was instructed to create a new Jerusalem for Christians who couldn't make the pilgrimage to the Holy Land. The layout of the churches intentionally mirrors sacred sites in Jerusalem, with features representing the Jordan River and even a replica of the Tomb of Adam. This wasn't just architecture, but a deliberate attempt to transplant the sacred geography of the Holy Land to Ethiopian soil. The engineering challenges involved in creating these structures were immense. Workers had to ensure adequate drainage to prevent the churches from flooding during the rainy season. They needed to calculate precisely how much rock to remove while leaving sufficient support for the massive roof sections. They had to plan for natural lighting through strategically placed windows in open areas. All of this was accomplished without modern tools or the mathematical and engineering knowledge we take for granted today. Beyond their architectural significance, the churches of Lalibela represent a living spiritual tradition. Unlike many ancient sites that exist primarily as tourist attractions or archaeological specimens, these churches continue to fulfill their original purpose. Orthodox Christian services are held daily, with major religious festivals attracting thousands of pilgrims from across Ethiopia. The site remains a place of genuine devotion rather than simply a historical curiosity. The creation of Lalibela's underground churches represents a different relationship with the subterranean realm than we've seen at many other sites. Rather than adapting to natural underground spaces or creating utilitarian chambers for practical purposes, the builders of Lalibela deliberately chose to place their most sacred structures below ground level. This decision reflects theological and symbolic considerations, perhaps representing humility before God, the descent required before spiritual ascension, or creating a physical boundary between the sacred space and the ordinary world above. From spiritual sanctuaries, let's venture to one of nature's most recently discovered subterranean wonders, the massive crystal geode of Pulpy in southern Spain. Hidden within an abandoned silver mine, this mineral marvel remained unknown to science until 1999, when members of the Madrid mineralogist group stumbled upon a cavity unlike anything they had ever seen. What makes the Pulpy geode extraordinary is both its size and the perfection of its crystals. The oval-shaped cavity measures approximately 8 meters long and 2 meters high, large enough for several people to stand inside. Its walls are lined with perfectly transparent selenite crystals, a form of gypsum reaching up to 2 meters in length. These crystals are so clear that they appear like massive pieces of ice, their geometric facets reflecting light with mathematical precision. Unlike most geodes, which form within relatively small rocks and must be cut open to reveal their crystal-lined interiors, the Pulpy formation is large enough to enter physically. Standing inside, visitors experience the disorienting sensation of being surrounded by geometric perfection on all sides, massive transparent crystals extending from every surface, their flat faces and sharp edges appearing almost artificially precise in their alignment. The conditions that created this natural wonder were extraordinary. Scientists believe the geode formed through a process that took millions of years and required very specific and stable conditions. Warm mineral-rich water slowly filled the cavity, maintaining a temperature and chemical composition that allowed the selenite crystals to grow at an extremely slow rate. This gradual process, perhaps just a few millimeters of growth per 1,000 years, allowed the formation of exceptionally large and perfect crystal structures. What's particularly remarkable about the Pulpy geode is how long it remained hidden despite being relatively close to the surface. The silver mine, where it's located, operated for decades without miners discovering the crystal chamber, which was separated from active tunnels by just a thin wall of rock. It wasn't until the mine had been abandoned and mineral enthusiasts began exploring the old workings that this extraordinary formation came to light. After its discovery, authorities faced a difficult conservation challenge. The perfect crystals are extremely fragile and can be damaged by changes in temperature, humidity, or even the oils from human skin. Yet the scientific and educational value of such a formation argued for making it accessible to researchers and the public. After years of careful planning, the site opened to limited tourism in 2019, with strict protocols to protect the crystals, including maintained pathways, controlled visitor numbers, and prohibition against touching any surfaces. The Pulpy geode reminds us that significant discoveries continue to be made even in regions that have been inhabited and extensively mined for centuries. Our planet's underground realm still holds wonders waiting to be found, sometimes separated from us by just a few feet of rock. Each new finding, like the Pulpy geode, expands our understanding of the extraordinary processes that shape our world beneath the surface. From crystal chambers, let's explore one of the most unusual underground environments created by human activity, the repurposed salt mine of Serenity in Romania. What began as a salt extraction operation dating back to antiquity has been transformed into one of the world's most surreal underground attractions, complete with an amusement park, amphitheater, and underground lake. Salt mining at Turda began during the Roman period and continued until 1932, leaving behind massive chambers excavated from the solid salt deposits. After extraction ceased, the mines were used briefly for storing cheese and as a bomb shelter during World War II before falling into disuse. In 1992, the mine reopened as a halotherapy, salt therapy center, and tourist attraction, but it was the 2010 renovation that transformed it into its current extraordinary form. The main extraction chamber, known as the Rudolph Mine, descends 120 meters below ground level and houses some of the site's most unusual features. A massive Ferris wheel rises from the chamber floor, its colorful gondolas rotating slowly against the backdrop of rough salt walls. Nearby, visitors can play miniature golf or bowl on lanes installed on the chamber floor. An amphitheater hosts concerts and events, with the salt walls providing natural acoustic properties that create an exceptional sound environment. Perhaps the most visually striking feature is the underground lake that occupies the lowest level of the mine. Visitors can rent rowboats to explore this subterranean body of water, which reflects the illuminated salt ceiling to create a mirrored effect that seems to extend the space infinitely. The lake formed naturally after the mine's abandonment as groundwater seeped in and dissolved additional salt, creating a highly saline body of water approximately 8 meters deep. The contrast between the ancient industrial history of the site and its modern recreational use creates a surreal juxtaposition. Original mining equipment remains in place, massive wooden structures used to transport salt to the surface, hand-carved stairs spiraling down the mine shaft, and tools used by generations of miners over the centuries. These historical elements exist alongside modern amenities, like elevators, cafes, and colorful lighting installations that highlight the textured salt walls. Beyond its recreational aspects, Serenity continues to serve therapeutic purposes. The consistent temperature 10 to 12 degrees Celsius year-round, and the air-rich in salt aerosols create an environment believed to benefit people with respiratory conditions, like asthma and bronchitis. A dedicated treatment area allows visitors to spend extended periods breathing the salt-infused air, continuing a therapeutic tradition that dates back centuries in salt mines throughout Eastern Europe. The transformation of Serenity represents an innovative approach to post-industrial spaces. Rather than allowing the abandoned mine to deteriorate or attempting to restore it to some approximation of its original condition, the designers embraced its unique qualities while adding entirely new functions. The result is neither purely historical preservation nor completely modern development, but rather a dialogue between past and present that acknowledges both the industrial heritage and contemporary needs. From repurposed industrial spaces, let's descend into one of the most scientifically significant cave systems in North America, the Chugala Cave in New Mexico, which we touched on earlier but deserves deeper exploration for its contributions to astrobiology and the search for extraterrestrial life. The extreme conditions and unique microbial communities found in Chugala provide some of our best analogs for what life might look like on other worlds, particularly Mars. What makes Chugala particularly valuable for astrobiologists is its long isolation from the surface environment. The entrance passage was naturally sealed by debris for thousands of years before its discovery in 1986, creating an environment that evolved with minimal influence from the surface world. This isolation allowed for the development of microbial communities adapted to conditions that in some ways resemble what we might expect to find beneath the surface of Mars. Scientists studying Chugala have identified microorganisms that can derive energy from the cave's minerals rather than from sunlight or organic matter. These chemolitho-atrophic bacteria, literally rock-eating self-feeders, utilize chemical pathways that could potentially support life in the harsh Martian subsurface, where traditional energy sources are unavailable. Some of these microbes can metabolize manganese and iron compounds in the cave walls, while others utilize sulfur or hydrogen compounds, all potential energy sources that might exist beneath the surface of other worlds. What's particularly fascinating about these microbial communities is their resilience. Some bacteria found in Chugala can survive with extremely limited nutrients, going dormant for extended periods when resources are scarce. Others have developed mechanisms to repair DNA damage caused by background radiation, a crucial adaptation for any organism that might live in the higher radiation environment of Mars. These survival strategies represent potential pathways for how life might persist in the hostile conditions of other planets. The cave also preserves geochemical processes that might parallel those on other worlds. The sulfuric acid dissolution that formed Lichagilla is chemically similar to processes that satellite imagery suggests may have occurred on Mars. By studying how these reactions shaped Lichagilla over millions of years, scientists gain insight into how similar caves might have formed on the red planet during its more geologically active past. If life did evolve on Mars, such subsurface environments might have provided protected habitats long after the surface became inhospitable. Access to Lichagilla is so restricted that researchers must go through an extensive application process, demonstrating scientific necessity before being granted permits to enter. Those approved must follow strict protocols to prevent contamination, changing into clean clothing, using sterilized equipment, and following designated paths to minimize their impact on this pristine environment. This careful approach preserves the scientific value of the cave while allowing crucial research to continue. The management philosophy recognizes that once contaminated with surface microbes, the unique value of Lichagilla as a Mars analog would be irreparably damaged. From astrobiological laboratories, let's journey to one of Earth's most recently discovered underground wonders, the vast network of Krubera Varanja Cave in the Arabica Massif of Abkhazia, Georgia. Currently recognized as the deepest known cave in the world, Krubera Varanja descends an astonishing 2,197 meters, 7,208 feet from its entrance, deep enough to stack 6 Empire State Buildings vertically with room to spare. The journey from entrance to the deepest explored point takes expedition teams approximately a month of difficult caving, navigating through miles of passages that alternately squeeze down to crawl spaces and open into massive chambers. What makes exploration of Krubera Varanja particularly challenging isn't just its depth, but the complexity of its passages. Unlike commercial caves with their wide, accessible tunnels, Krubera features sections where cavers must navigate through near sumps, passages almost completely filled with water, leaving just inches of airspace. Other areas require technical climbing or rappelling down shafts hundreds of meters deep, with the constant awareness that any injury would require an extraordinarily difficult rescue operation. The temperature hovers around 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, 35 to 37 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the system, with high humidity making hypothermia a constant risk for explorers. The biology of Krubera has proven as interesting as its physical characteristics. In 2010, scientists discovered a new species of blind insect living at a depth of over 1,800 meters, the deepest terrestrial animal ever found. Named Plutomurus or Tobologantensis, this tiny, eyeless creature has adapted to life in perpetual darkness at extreme depth, surviving on the sparse organic matter that filters down from the surface. Later expeditions discovered additional unique species, including a translucent crustacean that represents one of the most isolated populations ever studied. The history of Krubera's exploration represents one of the great adventure stories in modern speleology. The cave was first noted in the 1960s, but was initially explored to a depth of only about 95 meters before cavers encountered what appeared to be an impassable restriction. For decades, it remained an obscure site until the Ukrainian Speleological Association began systematic expeditions in the 1990s, gradually pushing deeper through tight squeezes that had stopped earlier explorers. The breakthrough came in 2001, when an expedition reached 1,710 meters, claiming the world depth record, a record that was extended in subsequent expeditions until reaching the current depth in 2018. What drives explorers to endure the extreme conditions of deep cave expeditions, like those to Krubera? The physical challenges are enormous. Cavers must carry all supplies through miles of difficult passages, establish underground camps where they'll live for days or weeks, and deal with the psychological impact of spending extended periods in absolute darkness. Yet each year, international teams continue to mount expeditions, seeking to push the boundaries of known passages and perhaps discover an even deeper point. The motivation seems to blend scientific curiosity with the fundamental human drive to explore, to go where no one has gone before, and map the unknown. From the deepest cave, let's shift our attention to one of the most visually spectacular underground environments, the Fly Geyser in Nevada's Black Rock Desert. Not a cave in the traditional sense, Fly Geyser represents what happens when human activities accidentally tap into geothermal systems, creating an entrance to the heated underworld that typically remains hidden beneath the surface. Created unintentionally in 1964, when a geothermal energy company drilled a well that wasn't properly sealed, the site has evolved into a surreal landscape of multicolored mineral mounds and steaming pools that seems more alien than terrestrial. What makes Fly Geyser particularly remarkable is its vivid coloration. The growing mineral mounds, now reaching heights of over 6 feet, display stunning reds, greens, and blues, resulting from thermophilic algae that thrive in the hot water environment. Different species dominate different temperature zones as the water cools flowing away from the main vents, creating a rainbow effect across the terraced mineral formations. The constant deposition of minerals continues to reshape the landscape, with the mounds growing approximately several inches per year as dissolved calcium carbonate and other minerals precipitate out of the hot water. The geothermal system that powers Fly Geyser extends deep into the Earth's crust, where groundwater comes into contact with rocks heated by magmatic activity below. Under pressure, and at temperatures approaching 200 degrees Fahrenheit, this water dissolves minerals from the surrounding rock and carries them upward. When the superheated water reaches the surface and cools, it can no longer hold these minerals in solution, causing them to precipitate out and form the growing travertine mounds that characterize the site. This process, occurring in real time, provides a visible demonstration of the geological forces that shape our planet's subsurface over much longer timescales. For decades, Fly Geyser remained on private property, with limited access, becoming something of a legend among photographers and nature enthusiasts. In 2016, the Burning Man project purchased the land containing the geyser and developed plans to allow managed public access while protecting the fragile formations. Today, limited tours allow visitors to experience this accidental wonder, a rare case where human intervention in natural systems created something of extraordinary beauty rather than environmental damage. The site serves as a reminder that the boundary between the surface world and the geothermal realm beneath is thinner than we might imagine, with powerful forces constantly at work just below our feet. From accidental geothermal features, let's venture to one of the world's most recently discovered natural cave systems, the vast network of the Veryovkina Cave in Abkhazia, Georgia. Until 2018, Veryovkina was the second deepest known cave in the world, after Kribera Varanja, which we discussed earlier, with a surveyed depth of 2,212 meters, 7,257 feet below its entrance. What makes Veryovkina particularly notable isn't just its extreme depth, but the rapid pace of its exploration. Most of the significant discoveries have occurred since 2015, with major extensions mapped during expeditions by the Perovo Speleo team from Moscow. The physical challenges of exploring Veryovkina are extraordinary, even by caving standards. Beyond the technical difficulties of navigating narrow passages and vertical shafts, explorers must contend with numerous flooded sections and the risk of sudden flooding during rain events on the surface, far above. In 2018, a team of Russian cavers experienced this danger firsthand when rapidly rising water trapped them at a depth of nearly 2,000 meters, forcing a dramatic rescue operation that took nearly 4 days to extract all team members safely. This incident highlighted the extreme isolation of deep cave environments. At such depths, even communication with the surface becomes nearly impossible, and self-rescue is often the only option. Like many deep caves, Veryovkina features distinct zones with different characteristics as one descends. The upper sections contain relatively dry passages, with some formations typical of karst caves, stalactites, stalagmites, and flowstone created by slowly dripping water. Middle sections feature more active water flow, with streams and waterfalls that have carved smooth-walled passages through the limestone. The deepest regions become increasingly challenging, with numerous sumps completely water-filled passages that require specialized cave diving techniques to explore. What drives the formation of such incredibly deep cave systems? Veryovkina and neighboring deep caves in the Arabica Massif developed through a complex interplay of geology and hydrology over millions of years. The limestone in which these caves formed was originally deposited under ancient seas but was later thrust upward during mountain-building processes associated with the collision of tectonic plates. As the mountains rose, water began cutting downward through the soluble limestone, always seeking the level of the sea, which in this region lies thousands of meters below the mountain peaks, where the cave entrances are located. The exploration of Veryovkina continues, with each expedition potentially extending the known depth or discovering significant new passages. The current bottom of the cave appears to be a sump, a water-filled passage that would require cave diving to explore further. Given the extreme depth and the logistical challenges of transporting diving equipment through miles of difficult passages, this final frontier of the cave may remain unexplored for years to come. Yet the history of speleology suggests that determined explorers will eventually find a way to push even these boundaries, perhaps discovering that Veryovkina extends even deeper than currently known. From modern exploration challenges, let's turn to historical mysteries and journey beneath the streets of ancient Rome, where an elaborate network of tunnels and chambers, the catacombs, tell stories of early Christianity and the complex relationship between the living and the dead. Unlike natural cave systems, the Roman catacombs were entirely human-made, excavated from the soft volcanic tuff that underlies much of the city. Extending for approximately 375 miles in total, these underground passages house the remains of early Christians, Jews, and pagans, with the oldest sections dating back to the 2nd century CE. What drove the creation of such an extensive underground cemetery system? Several factors contributed to this development, including Roman laws that prohibited burial within the city walls, the high cost of land for cemetery use, and the desire of minority religious groups like Christians to maintain their own burial traditions separate from Roman customs. The soft, easily worked volcanic stone beneath Rome provided an ideal medium for excavation, allowing relatively small groups to create extensive underground networks with simple tools. Over generations, these networks expanded organically as new burial chambers were added to existing passages, eventually creating the vast labyrinth that continues to astonish visitors today. The Christian catacombs in particular represent important historical repositories, preserving some of the earliest known Christian art and symbolism. Wall paintings depict biblical scenes and early Christian symbols, like the fish, anchor, and good shepherd, visual shorthand for religious concepts during a period when Christianity was still developing its iconography. Inscriptions provide insights into the lives and beliefs of early Christians, including their understanding of death, resurrection, and the afterlife. These underground galleries serve not just as burial places, but as expressions of community identity during periods when Christians faced varying degrees of persecution or social marginalization. Unlike the popular image from films, the catacombs were not primarily hideouts for living Christians during persecutions. Their primary function remained funerary, places to respectfully inter the dead according to religious customs. However, evidence suggests that small religious services were sometimes held in the larger chambers, particularly commemorations honoring martyrs buried within the catacombs. These underground spaces thus served multiple roles: cemetery, occasional gathering place, and repository of community memory and identity. The rediscovery of Rome's catacombs during the 16th and 17th centuries had a profound impact on religious scholarship and archaeology. After being largely forgotten during the Middle Ages, these underground cemeteries were systematically explored by pioneering archaeologists like Antonio Bosio, sometimes called the Columbus of the Catacombs for his extensive documentation of these sites. The rediscovery challenged many assumptions about early Christianity and provided tangible connections to the Church's formative period. Today, the catacombs remain active sites of archaeological research, with new technologies allowing non-invasive investigation of areas too fragile for physical exploration. From ancient burial networks, let's journey to one of the most visually stunning cave environments on Earth, the marble caves of General Carrera Lake in Patagonia. Formed through the patient action of water on calcium carbonate over more than 6,000 years, these caves represent nature's artistry at its most sublime. What makes the marble caves, also called the Marble Cathedral or Capillas de Marmol, particularly extraordinary is the interaction between light, the translucent stone, and the turquoise waters of the lake, creating a constantly shifting display of color and reflection that seems almost supernatural in its beauty. Unlike most cave systems that form in darkness, the marble caves developed at the interface between rock and water, where waves gradually carved out smooth-walled chambers along the shoreline. The result is a series of water-filled caverns with arched ceilings and undulating walls, all composed of marble swirled with blues, grays, and browns. When sunlight penetrates the clear lake water, it illuminates these chambers from below, causing the marble to glow with an ethereal blue light that shifts with the time of day, weather conditions, and season. The effect is further enhanced by reflections from the water surface, which project rippling patterns onto the stone ceiling. A natural light show that never repeats exactly the same way twice. Accessing the marble caves requires a boat journey across General Carrera Lake, a glacial body of water that straddles the border between Chile and Argentina. The remote location has helped preserve these formations, limiting visitor numbers despite their extraordinary beauty. Local boat operators serve as informal guardians of the site, ensuring that tourists maintain appropriate distance from the fragile structures and don't damage the formations. This balance between access and preservation represents one of the central challenges in sharing underground wonders, allowing people to experience these remarkable environments without loving them to death through overvisitation. What visitors see today represents just a moment in these caves' ongoing evolution. The erosion that created them continues unabated, with each small wave contributing to the reshaping of the marble. The distinctive blue color of the water, which contributes significantly to the cave's visual impact, results from glacial flour, fine rock particles suspended in the meltwater from nearby glaciers. As climate change affects these glaciers, the optical properties of the lake water may change as well, potentially altering the visual character of the marble caves over coming decades. From water-sculpted marble, let's travel to one of the most biologically unusual cave environments ever discovered, Muval Cave in Romania. Sealed from the outside world for between 5.5 and 6 million years, this cave contains an ecosystem that exists entirely independently from the surface world, a biological time capsule that has evolved in isolation since before humans existed as a species. Discovered accidentally in 1986, when workers drilling a shaft for a geothermal power plant broke through into a previously unknown void, Movile Cave represents one of the most significant biological discoveries of the 20th century. What makes Movile extraordinary isn't its physical features, but its atmosphere and inhabitants. The cave contains a toxic cocktail of gases that would be lethal to most surface-dwelling organisms, high levels of hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide with very little oxygen. Despite these seemingly hostile conditions, the cave teems with life-38 species found nowhere else on Earth, comprising a food web that functions completely independently from sunlight or surface inputs. Instead of photosynthesis, the base of this unique ecosystem is chemosynthesis, bacteria that oxidize the hydrogen sulfide and methane in the cave atmosphere, using the energy from these chemical reactions much as plants use energy from sunlight. These chemosynthetic bacteria form floating mats on the surface of the cave's underground pools and coat the walls with a layer of slime that other creatures graze upon. From this foundation, a complete food web has evolved, 33 terrestrial and 15 aquatic invertebrate species, including water scorpions, leeches, and a variety of crustaceans. Many of these creatures show the classic adaptations to cave life: loss of pigmentation, giving them a ghostly white appearance, reduction or complete absence of eyes, and enhanced non-visual senses, like touch and chemical detection. What makes them truly remarkable, however, is that they've been evolving in isolation for millions of years, a separate experiment in evolution occurring in parallel with the surface world. Access to Movile is extremely restricted due to both its scientific importance and the hazardous atmosphere inside. Researchers must wear breathing apparatus and protective clothing when entering the cave, and time inside is strictly limited to prevent contamination of this pristine ecosystem with microbes from the outside world. This protection is crucial, as introducing surface organisms could potentially devastate the unique life forms that have evolved in isolation for millions of years. Despite these restrictions, the scientific value of Movile has made it the subject of intensive research, particularly in the field of extremophile biology, the study of organisms that thrive in conditions that would be lethal to most life forms. The discovery of ecosystems like Movile has profound implications for astrobiology, the search for life beyond Earth. Before finding communities based on chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis, biologists generally assumed that all ecosystems ultimately depended on sunlight as their primary energy source. Now we recognize that life can thrive in environments completely disconnected from the sun's energy, a realization that expands the potential habitable zones on other worlds beyond the narrow range where photosynthesis would be possible. If life exists in the subsurface oceans of moons like Europa or Enceladus, it might well resemble the chemosynthetic communities found in places like Movile Cave. From biological wonders, let's turn to one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites in the underground world, the ancient city of Derinkuyu in Turkey's Cappadocia region. Descending 8 levels and reaching depths of over 250 feet, this massive underground complex could shelter up to 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food stores. Archaeological evidence suggests that Derinkuyu was first excavated by the Phrygians around the 8th-7th centuries BCE, though it was significantly expanded during the Byzantine era when Christian communities sought refuge from Arab invasions. The engineering knowledge required to create Derinkuyu is impressive, even by modern standards. The builders had to ensure proper ventilation throughout multiple levels, create water systems that wouldn't contaminate living areas, and excavate chambers large enough for communal activities while leaving sufficient support to prevent collapse. All of this was accomplished without modern power tools, using only human labor and simple implements to slowly carve a habitable world from solid rock. The ventilation system is particularly remarkable. A central shaft extends from the deepest level to the surface, with smaller shafts branching off to distribute fresh air throughout the complex. Defensive considerations clearly influenced every aspect of Derinkuyu's design. Each level could be sealed off from the ones below by massive stone doors, circular slabs weighing up to a ton that could only be opened from the inside. Narrow passageways would force any attackers to move in single file, making them vulnerable to defenders. Ventilation shafts that brought fresh air into the depths were designed with security in mind, preventing enemies from using them as entry points or for chemical warfare tactics like smoke. Even the wells that provided water were not connected to the surface, ensuring that besieged inhabitants would maintain access to this crucial resource even if attackers controlled the area above. What would daily life have been like in such a place? Historical accounts suggest that the underground cities weren't permanent residences, but rather temporary refuges during periods of invasion or religious persecution. Still, evidence indicates that people sometimes live below ground for months at a time, maintaining a semblance of normal society in these artificial caverns. The complex includes areas that appear to have been used as communal kitchens, storerooms, religious spaces, schools, and even wineries, suggesting that inhabitants attempted to maintain normal cultural and economic activities despite their unusual circumstances. Perhaps most intriguing is that Derinkoyu wasn't an isolated phenomenon. Archaeologists have identified at least 40 similar underground cities in the Cappadocia region, with evidence suggesting they were connected by tunnels stretching for miles. This wasn't a single community's solution to a temporary problem, but rather a regional adaptation that developed over generations, a parallel world beneath the surface, where entire populations could vanish when threats appeared above. Only about half of Derinkoyu has been excavated and open to visitors, with lower levels still awaiting proper archaeological study, meaning that many of the city's secrets remain hidden, preserved in the darkness that has protected them for thousands of years. From ancient refuges, let's journey to one of the most visually spectacular cave systems in North America, Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. While less well known than its neighbor Lechigila, which we discussed earlier, Carlsbad features some of the most dramatic underground spaces accessible to general visitors anywhere in the world. The main chamber, aptly named the Big Room, covers an area equivalent to 14 football fields, making it one of the largest accessible cave chambers on the planet. With its massive scale and extraordinary decorations, Carlsbad represents the grand cathedral of American cave systems, a space of such overwhelming dimension that first-time visitors frequently report feeling small and humbled in its presence. What makes Carlsbad particularly notable among the world's great caves is its unusual formation process. Unlike most limestone caves, which form through the slow action of slightly acidic rainwater, Carlsbad was created primarily through a process called sulfuric acid dissolution. Hydrogen sulfide gas rising from oil deposits deep below the cave reacted with groundwater to form sulfuric acid, which then aggressively dissolved the limestone to create massive chambers. This different chemical environment contributed to the extraordinary diversity of mineral formations found throughout the system, from the expected stalactites and stalagmites to rare formations like cave pearls, popcorn, and delicate aragonite Christmas trees. The story of Carlsbad's discovery captures the essence of underground exploration. In 1898, a local cowboy named Jim White spotted what appeared to be smoke rising from the desert floor, actually millions of bats emerging from the cave's natural entrance at dusk. Fashioning a makeshift ladder from wire and wooden fence posts, White descended into the darkness with only a kerosene lantern for light, becoming the first documented human to enter what would later be recognized as one of the world's great natural wonders. For years afterward, White led expeditions into the cave, gradually mapping its extent and sharing its wonders with an initially skeptical public. One of Carlsbad's most famous features isn't a geological formation but a biological phenomenon, the evening emergence of hundreds of thousands of Brazilian free-tailed bats from the natural entrance. From spring through autumn, visitors gather at an amphitheater constructed near the entrance to witness this spectacular exodus as the bats spiral upward in a living tornado before dispersing across the desert to feed on night-flying insects. The colony will consume tons of insects each night, including many agricultural pests, before returning to the cave at dawn. This nightly emergence represents one of nature's great spectacles, a reminder that caves aren't just geological curiosities, but vital habitats for specialized creatures. The human history of Carlsbad extends far beyond Jim White's exploration. Archaeological evidence indicates that Native Americans knew of the entrance for thousands of years, though there's limited evidence they ventured deep into the darkness. The caves also preserve a record of their natural history. Bones of Ice Age animals, like giant sloths and prehistoric jaguars, have been discovered in remote chambers, animals that fell into the cave or were perhaps dragged there by predators thousands of years ago. Each of these discoveries adds another layer to our understanding of this extraordinary underground world, a place where geology, biology, and human history intersect in the darkness beneath the desert. From the grand scale of Carlsbad, let's venture to one of the most otherworldly underground environments on our planet, the Nica Mines Crystal Cave in Chihuahua, Mexico. Discovered in 2000 by miners working nearly 1,000 feet below the surface, this chamber contains some of the largest natural crystals ever found, massive selenite beams reaching lengths of over 36 feet and weighing up to 55 tons. What makes the Crystal Cave even more extraordinary is the combination of factors that allowed these mineral giants to form: a precise temperature of around 122 degrees Fahrenheit maintained for hundreds of thousands of years, with mineral-rich water providing the raw materials for growth. These conditions create an environment that is as hostile to humans as it is perfect for crystal formation. The cave maintains near 100% humidity, combined with temperatures that can cause heat stroke in unprotected humans within minutes. Explorers and scientists can only enter for short periods, using specialized cooling suits and breathing apparatus, similar to what astronauts wear during spacewalks. Even with this equipment, visits are typically limited to 30–45 minutes before the risk of hypothermia becomes life-threatening. This extreme environment has kept the cave largely pristine, with research activities carefully planned to minimize both risk to humans and impact on the extraordinary formations. The crystals themselves formed through an exquisitely slow process. The chamber was filled with mineral-rich water that maintained a temperature just at the threshold where gypsum crystallization could occur. Any hotter, and the crystals wouldn't form. Any cooler, and they would form too quickly, creating the smaller formations we see in more typical caves. This perfect balance was maintained for somewhere between 500,000 and 900,000 years, allowing the crystals to grow at the glacial pace of perhaps an inch or two per thousand years. This timescale is almost impossible for our human minds to truly comprehend. When the slowest growing crystals began forming, Homo sapiens didn't yet exist as a species. Entire human civilizations have risen and fallen in less time than it took for these mineral structures to reach their current dimensions. Standing among these formations is to confront deep time in physical form, to see the results of processes that operate on timescales so vast that our entire recorded history represents just a fleeting moment in comparison. The discovery of the Crystal Cave highlights how much of our planet's underground realm likely remains unknown. This wasn't a small crack or minor cavern. It's a chamber containing some of the most spectacular mineral formations ever discovered, yet it remained completely undocumented until workers accidentally broke through its walls while excavating a new mining tunnel. How many more extraordinary environments might exist beneath our feet, separated from human knowledge by mere meters of rock? The history of underground exploration suggests that significant discoveries continue to be made even in regions that have been extensively studied, reminding us how much remains to be learned about the world beneath the surface. From crystal giants, let's travel to one of the most biologically diverse cave systems on Earth, Puerto Rico's Rio Camui Cave Park. Carved by the third largest underground river in the world, this extensive network features massive chambers, towering waterfalls, and an extraordinary variety of cave-adapted organisms that have evolved in isolation from their surface relatives. The scale of the Rio Camui system is difficult to comprehend. While only a small portion has been developed for tourism, the mapped sections include over 10 miles of passages with hundreds of entrances dotting the karst landscape above. What makes Rio Camui particularly significant from a biological perspective is its location in a tropical environment with high surface biodiversity. Unlike caves in more temperate regions, which might contain dozens of specialized species, tropical cave systems like Rio Camui can support hundreds of uniquely adapted organisms, from blind fish and crayfish to specialized insects, arachnids, and microbes found nowhere else on Earth. The high-energy input from the surface world, organic material carried in by the river, animals that accidentally enter the system, and nutrients that seep through the porous limestone supports food webs of remarkable complexity. These underground ecosystems represent biological treasures of inestimable scientific value, offering insights into evolutionary processes that occur when populations become isolated in extreme environments. The human history of Rio Camui stretches back millennia. Archaeological evidence indicates that the Taino people, the indigenous inhabitants of Puerto Rico before European contact, knew of the cave system and considered it a sacred place. Petroglyphs and other artifacts found near cave entrances suggest these sites held spiritual significance, perhaps as portals to the underworld or dwelling places of deities. More recent history has seen systematic exploration of the system, beginning with the pioneering work of speleologist Norman Veuve and the Sociedad Espeleológica de Puerto Rico in the 1950s, and continuing with ongoing survey efforts that regularly add newly discovered passages to the map. One of Rio Camui's most spectacular features is the contrast between dark zones, areas of absolute darkness where no natural light penetrates, and twilight zones near entrances, where partial illumination creates unique transitional ecosystems. These twilight zones often support the highest biodiversity, with organisms from both surface and cave environments competing and coexisting in the gradient between light and darkness. For visitors, the transition between these zones creates a powerful psychological effect, a gradual dimming of familiar sensory input as one moves deeper into the system, eventually reaching areas where the absence of light is so complete that even the most sensitive eyes can detect nothing. The future of Rio Camui and similar tropical cave systems faces significant challenges from both natural events and human activities. Hurricanes can cause catastrophic flooding in underground rivers, altering passages, and potentially disrupting delicate ecosystems that have evolved over thousands of years. Surface development, particularly deforestation and agriculture, can change the quality and quantity of water entering the system, introducing pollutants or sediments that affect water chemistry throughout the underground network. Conservation efforts focus on protecting not just the caves themselves, but the entire watershed that feeds them, recognizing that these systems cannot be isolated from the surface environments upon which they depend. From tropical biodiversity, let's journey to one of the most historically significant underground environments in Europe, the Paris catacombs. Beginning in the late 18th century, the growing city of Paris faced a crisis as its cemeteries reached capacity, creating serious public health concerns. The solution came in the form of abandoned limestone quarries beneath the city tunnels that had provided building stone for Paris's elegant architecture, but had been largely forgotten as urban development continued above them. Between 1786 and 1814, the remains of approximately 6 million people were transferred from cemeteries throughout Paris to these underground galleries, creating one of the world's largest ossuaries. The official catacombs open to tourists represent just a small fraction of what exists beneath Paris. The entire network of ancient quarries, known as Les Carrés de Paris, stretches for approximately 200 miles beneath the city. Most of these passages remain officially closed to the public, though that hasn't stopped a subculture of urban explorers known as cataphiles from illegally exploring the maze of tunnels, creating underground art galleries, hosting clandestine concerts, and even establishing secret swimming pools in larger chambers. This tension between official prohibition and persistent exploration has created a cat-and-mouse game that has continued for generations, with police units specifically tasked with catacomb patrol, colloquially known as cataflics, regularly sweeping the tunnels and issuing fines to trespassers. What makes the Paris catacombs particularly striking is the organized arrangement of the human remains. Rather than simply depositing bones in the tunnels, the workers who created the ossuary arranged them in elaborate patterns, walls meticulously constructed from femurs and skulls, creating geometric designs and religious symbols. Stone plaques throughout the ossuary bear philosophical inscriptions about mortality and the equalizing nature of death. One of the most famous reads, "Arrête, c'est ici l'empire de la mort." Stop, this is the empire of death, a somber greeting to visitors entering this underground memorial. The catacombs have played various roles throughout Parisian history, beyond their function as an ossuary. During World War II, both the French resistance and German military utilized sections of the quarry network. The resistance established hidden bunkers and meeting spaces in areas that were difficult to access and not documented on official maps. Meanwhile, German forces constructed a bunker beneath the Lycée Montaigne, connecting it to the quarry system to create a protected underground headquarters. These historical layers add complexity to an already multifaceted underground environment, a place that serves simultaneously as cemetery, geological formation, historical site, and cultural phenomenon. Even today, the catacombs occasionally create problems for modern Paris. The ancient mining operations removed massive amounts of stone from beneath the city, sometimes leaving insufficient support for the ground above. Periodic collapses have occurred throughout Paris's history, with streets and even buildings suddenly sinking as ancient quarry ceilings give way. The Inspection Générale des Carrières, General Inspection of Quarries, was established in 1777 and continues its work today, monitoring the stability of the quarries and reinforcing dangerous areas. This ongoing maintenance represents one of the world's longest-running geotechnical projects, nearly 2.5 centuries of continuous effort to ensure that the city above doesn't fall into the void below. From historical depths, let's ascend to one of the most visually spectacular cave environments in North America, Oregon's Lava River Cave. Unlike the limestone caves we've primarily discussed, Lava River Cave represents an entirely different formation process, a lava tube created during volcanic eruptions approximately 80,000 years ago. As lava flowed from Newberry Volcano, the outer layer cooled and hardened while the hotter material inside continued to flow. When the eruption ended and the last of the molten rock drained out, it left behind a hollow tube, a perfect cast of the original lava river that once flowed beneath the surface. What makes Lava River Cave particularly impressive is its length and consistency. Stretching for over a mile, it represents one of the longest continuous lava tubes in the continental United States. The main passage maintains a remarkably consistent shape throughout its length, an arched ceiling above a relatively flat floor, with dimensions large enough to walk upright in most sections. The walls preserve evidence of the tube's fiery origin, horizontal bathtub rings marking different flow levels as the lava river gradually subsided, and cooling cracks that formed as the rock contracted after solidification. The environmental conditions in lava tubes differ markedly from those in limestone caves. The volcanic rock maintains different temperature patterns and supports distinctive ecosystems. Lava River Cave, maintains a constant temperature of approximately 42 degrees Fahrenheit, 5.5 degrees Celsius year-round, regardless of surface conditions. This thermal stability has practical implications. During the Prohibition era, local residents reportedly used sections of the cave for aging and storing illegal alcohol, taking advantage of the consistent cool temperature that provides ideal conditions for many fermentation processes. Unlike the absolute darkness of deep limestone caves, many lava tubes feature sections where the ceiling has partially collapsed, creating natural skylights called roof holes. These openings allow limited light to penetrate the underground environment, creating transitional ecosystems where plants can grow in the reduced illumination. They also provide access points for animals, both those seeking shelter and those unfortunate enough to fall in accidentally. Paleontologists have discovered bones of Ice Age animals in some lava tubes, suggesting these formations have served as natural pitfall traps for thousands of years. The formation of lava tubes isn't limited to Earth. Satellite imagery has identified similar structures on both the Moon and Mars, where volcanic activity created analogous subsurface passages. These extraterrestrial lava tubes have generated significant interest among space agencies and researchers planning for potential future human presence on these bodies. The natural radiation shielding and temperature stability provided by being underground would offer significant advantages for habitats, while the pre-excavated spaces would reduce the need for construction in hostile environments. What began as a geological curiosity has become a potential blueprint for humanity's first homes beyond Earth. From volcanic passages, let's journey to one of the most historically significant cave environments in human prehistory, the decorated caves of France's Dordogne region. Sites like Lascaux, Font-de-Jaume, and Ruffinac contain some of the most sophisticated Paleolithic art ever discovered, with images dating back approximately 17,000 years. These aren't crude stick figures, but carefully observed and skillfully rendered images showing understanding of animal anatomy, movement, and behavior. The artists who created these images developed sophisticated techniques, using natural contours in the rock to give their paintings a three-dimensional quality, preparing pigments from minerals like iron oxide and manganese, and creating primitive lamps to illuminate their work deep underground. What drove our ancestors to venture into the darkness to create these remarkable galleries? Archaeologists and anthropologists have proposed various theories. Perhaps the caves were sites for shamanic rituals, places where ceremonial practitioners could access the spirit world through altered states of consciousness. Others suggest they might have served as teaching tools for young hunters, graphically depicting the animals upon which the community depended for survival. Some researchers propose they were expressions of sympathetic magic, creating images of successful hunts to influence future outcomes. The truth may combine elements of all these explanations, or perhaps reflect motivations we haven't yet considered. The discovery of these prehistoric galleries has profoundly impacted our understanding of human cognitive development. The sophisticated artistic techniques employed suggest that the minds that created them were fully modern in their capacity for symbolic thinking, aesthetic appreciation, and cultural transmission of knowledge. These weren't primitive attempts at representation, but accomplished works, created by people with well-developed artistic traditions that must have been passed down through generations of artists working in materials that haven't survived in the archaeological record. The cave paintings represent rare glimpses of artistic capabilities that likely extended to many other media now lost to time. Unfortunately, the very discovery of these sites placed them in danger. After being open to tourism, many decorated caves began experiencing significant damage from the carbon dioxide, heat, and humidity introduced by thousands of visitors. Microscopic organisms began colonizing the walls, threatening the ancient paintings with what became known as green sickness and white disease, bacterial and fungal growths that could potentially obscure or destroy imagery that had survived for millennia. This led to difficult decisions about access and preservation, with many sites now closed to general visitation or limited to very small numbers of visitors per day. To satisfy public interest without endangering the original caves, French authorities created meticulous replicas of the major decorated sites. Lascaux, located near the original cave, reproduces the most spectacular chambers with remarkable accuracy. More recently, the Lascaux 4 International Center for Cave Art opened in 2016, utilizing cutting-edge technology to recreate the entire cave system with unprecedented fidelity. Similar facilities exist for other significant sites, allowing visitors to experience the wonder of Paleolithic art while the originals remain protected in isolation, slowly recovering from the damage caused by human visitation. From prehistoric art galleries, let's descend into one of the most unusual underground environments ever discovered. Vietnam's Hang Son Doong, currently recognized as the world's largest cave passage by volume. First documented by local farmer Ho Con in 1991, but not properly explored until a British caving team entered it in 2009. Sundong contains chambers so vast that they defy easy comprehension even for experienced cavers. The main passage stretches more than 5 kilometers in length, with ceiling heights reaching 200 meters, tall enough to accommodate an entire Manhattan skyscraper. At its widest, the passage measures 150 meters across, creating a void of such magnitude that it seems more like an underground valley than a traditional cave. What truly sets Sundong apart are its style lines, massive ceiling collapses that have created skylights to the world above. These openings have allowed sunlight to penetrate the depths, supporting the growth of entire forests on the cave floor. Standing in these chambers, explorers describe the surreal experience of seeing clouds form below the distant ceiling and rain falling inside the cave, a complete weather system developing in this underground world. The scale creates optical illusions that challenge human perception, massive stalagmites that appear to be just a few meters tall until a human figure stands beside them, revealing that they actually soar to heights of 80 meters or more. The formation of Sundong required an extraordinary sequence of geological events. Researchers believe the initial cave developed along a fault line in limestone between 2 and 5 million years ago. Underground rivers gradually carved out the passage, while periodic ceiling collapses created the massive chambers and skylight entrances we see today. The process continues. Geologists monitoring the cave have documented ongoing erosion and occasional rock falls that continue to shape this dynamic environment. What we see today represents just a moment in the cave's ongoing evolution, a snapshot of processes that have been unfolding for millions of years and will continue long after our brief human observation. Access to Sundong remains strictly limited to preserve its pristine condition. Only one tour company has permission to bring visitors, with groups limited to 10 people and advance bookings required years in advance. The journey isn't for casual tourists. Reaching the cave entrance requires a 2-day jungle trek followed by a rappel of 80 meters just to enter the system. Once inside, visitors camp underground for several nights as they traverse the massive chambers. This limited access has helped maintain the cave's extraordinary features, preventing the kind of damage that has affected more heavily visited sites around the world. What's particularly remarkable about Sundong is that it remained essentially unknown to the outside world until very recently. Local man Hokan discovered the entrance in 1991 while hunting in the jungle, but the sound of rushing water and the strong wind emanating from the opening discouraged him from entering. It wasn't until he led British cavers to the site in 2009 that the true scale of the discovery became apparent. This raises an intriguing question. How many other world-class cave systems might still await discovery in remote regions? The history of speleology suggests that significant finds continue to be made, even in areas that have seen extensive exploration, reminding us how much of our planet's underground realm remains unmapped and unknown. From natural cathedrals, let's venture to one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites in the underground world, the ancient stepwells of India. Unlike most underground structures that expand horizontally from an entrance, stepwells descend vertically from the surface, massive inverted pyramids lined with stairs that reach down to access groundwater. Developed between the 2nd and 4th century CE, and reaching their peak of architectural sophistication during the 11th century, these structures represent one of humanity's most elegant solutions to the challenge of water access in seasonally dry regions. What makes stepwells particularly remarkable is how they transform a purely utilitarian function, accessing groundwater, into an architectural and social achievement. The most elaborate examples, like Gujarat's Rani Ki Vav, the Queen's Stepwell, and Rajasthan's Chand Balri, feature multiple levels of ornate columns, alcoves containing religious sculptures, and intricate stone carvings that turn simple water access points into subterranean palaces. Beyond their practical function, stepwells became gathering places, sites of religious significance, and refuges from the intense heat of summer, their temperature growing progressively cooler as one descends toward the water level. The engineering knowledge required to create these structures was sophisticated even by modern standards. Builders had to understand groundwater patterns, seasonal fluctuations in the water table, and structural principles that would prevent collapse of the massive excavations. The steps had to be arranged to provide access regardless of water level, usable whether the well was nearly full after monsoon rains or at its lowest point during the dry season. All of this was accomplished without modern equipment or materials, using only human labor and simple tools to move thousands of tons of earth and stone. Unlike many ancient structures that were built and then gradually fell into disuse, stepwells remained actively utilized for centuries, in some cases for over 1,000 years. This continuous use created a living connection between generations, with each caretaker adding to or maintaining the work of those who came before. Unfortunately, many stepwells fell into disuse during the British colonial period, when they were often viewed as unhygienic compared to piped water systems. This break in the chain of continuous use led to neglect and deterioration of many examples, though recent conservation efforts have begun to restore some of the most significant structures. The decline of traditional stepwells represents a loss not just of architectural heritage, but of indigenous knowledge about sustainable water management. These structures were perfectly adapted to their environment, providing water access through dry seasons, helping recharge groundwater during monsoons, and creating microenvironments that supported both human communities and local biodiversity. As regions like Rajasthan face increasing water scarcity due to climate change and groundwater depletion, some communities have begun restoring historic stepwells, recognizing that ancient solutions may offer sustainable approaches to modern challenges. From water architecture, let's descend into one of Earth's most inhospitable underground environments, the toxic caves of Villa Luz in Tabasco, Mexico. Known locally as Cueva de las Sardinas, Cave of the Sardines due to the specialized fish that somehow survive in its poisonous waters, Villa Luz represents an extreme environment that challenges our understanding of where and how life can persist. The cave's atmosphere contains hydrogen sulfide gas at levels that would be lethal to humans without protective equipment. Yet a complex ecosystem has evolved to thrive in these seemingly impossible conditions. The most visible manifestation of Villa Luz's unusual chemistry is the presence of snotites, colonies of bacteria that hang from the cave ceiling in formations resembling mucus or snot. These living curtains consist primarily of extremophile bacteria that derive energy by oxidizing the hydrogen sulfide in the cave's atmosphere. As a byproduct of their metabolism, these bacteria create sulfuric acid so concentrated that the pH of liquid dripping from snotites can be as low as 0, comparable to battery acid. Yet despite these extraordinarily harsh conditions, the cave supports a surprising diversity of life, including specialized invertebrates and the eponymous fish that have evolved to tolerate the toxic environment. Researchers studying Villa Luz must contend not only with its toxic atmosphere, but also with the corrosive nature of the environment itself. Standard research equipment can be damaged or destroyed by the acidic conditions, requiring specialized tools and protective cases. Even the rock of the cave itself bears witness to these extreme conditions. In many areas, the limestone has been converted to gypsum through reaction with the sulfuric acid produced by microbial activity. These chemical processes continue in real time, making Villa Luz a natural laboratory for studying how caves form through sulfuric acid dissolution, rather than the more common carbonic acid processes found in typical limestone caves. The indigenous Soke people have interacted with Villa Luz for centuries, conducting an annual ritual called La Pesca de la Sardina, the fishing of the sardine. During this ceremony, community members enter the toxic cave, traditionally without protective equipment, to harvest the fish that somehow survive in its waters. The practice represents a remarkable example of human adaptation to an extreme environment, with participants developing techniques to minimize their exposure to the dangerous atmosphere while collecting a valuable protein source. Anthropologists studying this tradition note that it may have emerged during periods of food scarcity when the risk of entering the toxic cave was outweighed by the nutritional benefit of the harvest. The scientific significance of environments like Villa Luz extends beyond Earth. Astrobiologists study these systems as potential analogs for the conditions that might exist on other worlds, particularly Mars, where evidence suggests that subsurface environments with similar chemistry might have existed, or perhaps still exist. If life can thrive in the toxic conditions of an acid cave on Earth, perhaps similar adaptations could allow organisms to survive in seemingly inhospitable extraterrestrial environments. Each new discovery about extreme adaptations on our own planet expands our understanding of life's potential range and increases the possibility that we might find evidence of biology beyond Earth. From toxic extremes, let's journey to one of the most visually spectacular cave systems in Asia, the Reed Flute Cave near Guilin, China. Known locally as the Palace of Natural Arts, this limestone cave has been a tourist attraction for over 1,200 years, with inscriptions on the walls dating back to the Tang Dynasty, 792 CE. The name comes from the reeds growing outside the cave entrance, which can be crafted into musical instruments. What makes Reed Flute Cave extraordinary is the incredible variety and vibrancy of its formations: stalactites, stalagmites, columns, and curtains of flowstone take on shapes that have inspired poetic names over the centuries. During the Second World War, the cave served as a refuge for people fleeing Japanese air raids on Guilin. Exploration during this period revealed additional chambers that had remained hidden for centuries. Modern visitors experience the cave very differently than those ancient Tang Dynasty scholars. Today's pathways are illuminated by multicolored lights that transform the natural stone into a kaleidoscopic fantasy landscape. While some purists argue that artificial lighting detracts from the natural beauty of cave systems, there's no denying the magical quality of Reed Flute Cave's illuminated chambers. Perhaps what's most remarkable about Reed Flute Cave is not just its natural beauty, but its place in Chinese cultural history. The cave represents one of the earliest examples of geotourism in human civilization, a place where people have deliberately journeyed for more than a millennium specifically to experience the wonder of the underground world. Those Tang Dynasty inscriptions aren't just graffiti, they're poetry, philosophical observations, and artistic responses to the strange beauty of the subterranean realm. They represent a continuous thread of human experience connecting us directly to people who stood in the same spaces over 1,000 years ago, experiencing the same sense of wonder that modern visitors feel today. The karst landscape surrounding Reed Flute Cave contains hundreds of similar formations, though few match its scale and accessibility. The entire region represents one of the world's most significant examples of tower karst, a landscape characterized by isolated limestone hills, towers separated by flat plains. These distinctive formations have inspired Chinese landscape painting for centuries and continue to draw visitors from around the world. The underground and above-ground features are intimately connected. The same processes that created the caves by dissolving limestone underground also sculpted the dramatic peaks visible on the surface. As with many heavily visited cave systems worldwide, Reed Flute Cave faces ongoing conservation challenges. The heat and carbon dioxide introduced by thousands of visitors can alter the delicate chemistry that created the formations over millions of years. Cave managers must balance accessibility with preservation, ensuring that future generations can continue to experience the wonder of these underground spaces. Modern management techniques include visitor limits, careful lighting design to minimize heat generation, and monitoring systems that track environmental conditions throughout the cave system. From historical caves, let's turn to one of the most extraordinary geological discoveries of recent decades, the giant gypsum crystals of Nica in Mexico. Located within a working mine in Chihuahua, these crystal-filled chambers contain some of the largest mineral formations ever discovered. The main chamber, known as the Cave of Crystals, Cueva de los Cristales, houses massive selenite beams reaching lengths of over 36 feet and weighing up to 55 tons, crystals so large they seem to belong more in science fiction than reality. The conditions that created these crystal giants were extraordinary. For hundreds of thousands of years, the chamber maintained a consistent temperature of around 122 degrees Fahrenheit, with near 100% humidity, conditions that are lethal to unprotected humans, but perfect for the slow growth of enormous gypsum crystals. These conditions resulted from an unusual geological situation where the chamber sat at just the right depth above magma intrusions that heated the groundwater to the precise temperature where gypsum crystallization could occur at an extremely slow rate. Any hotter, and the crystals wouldn't form. Any cooler, and they would form more rapidly but remain much smaller. Exploring the crystal cave presents extreme challenges. The combination of high temperature and humidity creates conditions where unprotected humans can survive for only about 10 minutes before experiencing heat stroke. Scientists and photographers visiting the site must wear specialized cooling suits with breathing apparatus, equipment similar to what astronauts use during spacewalks. Even with this protection, visits are typically limited to 45 minutes before the risk becomes too great. These restrictions have limited scientific study of the formations, though several major research expeditions have been conducted under carefully controlled conditions. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Nica crystals is their timescale of formation. Analysis suggests that the largest crystals have been growing continuously for between 500,000 and 900,000 years, a period that encompasses the entire existence of our species. This glacial pace, perhaps just a few millimeters of growth per 1,000 years, allowed the formation of crystals of unprecedented size and purity. Standing among these formations is to confront deep time and physical form, to see the results of processes that operate on timescales so vast that our entire recorded history represents just a fleeting moment in comparison. The future of the Crystal Cave presents a conservation dilemma. The crystals formed under very specific conditions that were disrupted when mining operations pumped out the hot water that filled the chambers. Exposed to air, the crystals begin to deteriorate, their molecular structure changing as they react with oxygen and the altered humidity levels. When the mine eventually ceases operations and pumping stops, the chambers will likely flood again with mineral-rich water. While this might help preserve the remaining formations, it would also make them inaccessible for future study or appreciation. This situation highlights one of the persistent ethical questions in underground exploration. Is it better to document and study these wonders, knowing that human presence may contribute to their deterioration, or should some places remain untouched, their secrets preserved in darkness? What drove our ancestors to venture into the darkness to create these remarkable galleries? Archaeologists and anthropologists have proposed various theories. Perhaps the caves were sites for shamanic rituals, places where ceremonial practitioners could access the spirit world through altered states of consciousness. Others suggest they might have served as teaching tools for young hunters, graphically depicting the animals upon which the community depended for survival. Some researchers propose they were expressions of sympathetic magic, creating images of successful hunts to influence future outcomes. The truth may combine elements of all these explanations, or perhaps reflect motivations we haven't yet considered. The distance of time obscures the specific intentions of these ancient artists, but the power of their work transcends cultural and temporal boundaries to affect viewers even today with its naturalistic beauty and technical sophistication. The discovery of these prehistoric galleries has profoundly impacted our understanding of human cognitive development. The sophisticated artistic techniques employed suggest that the minds that created them were fully modern in their capacity for symbolic thinking, aesthetic appreciation, and cultural transmission of knowledge. These weren't primitive attempts at representation, but accomplished works created by people with well-developed artistic traditions that must have been passed down through generations of artists working in materials that haven't survived in the archaeological record. The cave paintings represent rare glimpses of artistic capabilities that likely extended to many other media, now lost to time. This realization has helped reshape our understanding of our Paleolithic ancestors, recognizing them not as simple cavemen, but as fully modern humans, with rich cultural lives and sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities. Unfortunately, the very discovery of these sites placed them in danger. After being open to tourism, many decorated caves began experiencing significant damage from the carbon dioxide, heat, and humidity introduced by thousands of visitors. Microscopic organisms began colonizing the walls, threatening the ancient paintings with what became known as green sickness and white disease, bacterial and fungal growths that could potentially obscure or destroy imagery that had survived for millennia. This led to difficult decisions about access and preservation, with many sites now closed to general visitation or limited to very small numbers of visitors per day. The most famous example is Lascaux, which was closed to the public in 1963, after visible damage began appearing on the painted walls, leading to the creation of Lascaux II, a meticulous replica that allows visitors to experience the art without endangering the originals. The management approaches developed for these prehistoric sites have influenced how we think about conservation of underground heritage worldwide. The concept of creating high-quality replicas to satisfy public interest while protecting originals has been adopted for other significant cave sites facing similar visitation pressures. Monitoring systems that track environmental conditions in decorated caves have established new standards for understanding and maintaining the delicate balance needed to preserve underground art and artifacts. The recognition that even seemingly minor changes in temperature, humidity, or air composition can trigger cascading effects in cave environments has led to more sophisticated approaches to managing all types of underground heritage. In this way, the challenges of preserving these oldest examples of human creativity have helped develop conservation techniques that benefit underground sites of all types and periods. From ancient art to modern exploration, let's examine one of the most significant developments in understanding our planet's underground realms, the emergence of speleology as a scientific discipline. While humans have entered and utilized caves throughout history, the systematic study of these environments as integrated systems is relatively recent, developing primarily in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Pioneers like Edouard Alfred Martel in France, E.A. Martel in England, and Herbert Kahn in America transformed cave exploration from adventure or resource extraction into methodical scientific investigation, documenting not just physical passages, but geological processes, hydrological systems, biological communities, and archaeological evidence. This holistic approach revealed caves as complex natural laboratories, where multiple scientific disciplines intersect, creating opportunities to study everything from evolutionary adaptation to climate history preserved in spell events. The development of standardized survey techniques, specialized equipment, and consistent documentation methods gradually transformed underground exploration from individual adventure to collective scientific enterprise, building a comprehensive understanding of subterranean environments that continues to expand with each new generation of researchers. Modern speleological research encompasses an extraordinary range of scientific questions. Geologists study caves to understand karst processes, groundwater movement, and the relationship between surface and subsurface landforms. Biologists investigate the unique adaptations of cave-dwelling organisms, from microbes to vertebrates, gaining insights into evolutionary processes that occur in isolated environments. Archaeologists and anthropologists examine how human communities have utilized underground spaces throughout history, from prehistoric shelter to modern tourism. Paleoclimatologists analyze cave formations to reconstruct ancient environmental conditions with remarkable precision, creating records that may extend back hundreds of thousands of years. This multidisciplinary approach has revealed caves as not just interesting features, but integrated components of larger environmental systems, places where surface and subsurface processes interact in complex ways that affect everything from water quality to biodiversity. The technical aspects of cave exploration have evolved dramatically over the past century, enabling access to environments that would have been impossible for earlier generations to reach. Modern cavers utilize specialized equipment, including powerful LED lighting systems, durable clothing designed for abrasion resistance and temperature regulation, sophisticated vertical techniques for ascending and descending pits, and communication systems that enhance safety in remote locations. Cave diving, perhaps the most technically demanding form of underground exploration, has developed into a highly specialized discipline, with dedicated equipment and protocols that allow trained individuals to venture into flooded passages that would have been completely inaccessible to previous generations. These technological advances have literally expanded the boundaries of the known underground world, allowing exploration of systems that remained hidden from human observation throughout our species' history until the development of these specialized approaches. The organization of speleology as a collaborative effort represents one of its most significant achievements. National and international caving organizations coordinate exploration, standardize mapping techniques, publish research, and establish ethical guidelines for cave visitation and study. The International Union of Speleology (UIS) connects cave scientists and explorers across national boundaries, facilitating information exchange and collaborative projects that would be impossible for individuals or small groups to accomplish. This networked approach has accelerated the pace of discovery and documentation, creating comprehensive databases of cave information that help identify patterns and connections across different regions and cave types. The speleological community's commitment to sharing knowledge while protecting sensitive site information represents a sophisticated balance between the scientific value of open exchange and the conservation imperative to prevent damage to vulnerable underground environments. Beyond its scientific contributions, modern speleology has played a crucial role in cave conservation and management. The detailed documentation of cave resources provides essential baseline information for monitoring changes over time and assessing potential threats. Speleologists often serve as advocates for cave protection, working with landowners, government agencies, and conservation organizations to develop appropriate management strategies for significant underground sites. The survey before protection model established by early speleologists continues today, recognizing that effective conservation requires thorough understanding of what exists before meaningful protection can be implemented. This symbiotic relationship between exploration and conservation ensures that new discoveries can be appropriately assessed and managed before irreversible damage occurs, a crucial consideration for environments where natural recovery processes may operate on timescales of centuries or millennia. The future of speleology points toward increasingly sophisticated integration of technology with traditional exploration methods. Three-dimensional mapping techniques using LiDAR, light detection, and ranging can create precise digital models of cave passages, allowing virtual examination of systems too fragile or dangerous for frequent physical visits. DNA sampling of cave sediments reveals the presence of organisms too small or elusive for direct observation, providing unprecedented insights into underground biodiversity. Remote sensing from aircraft or satellites can identify surface features associated with underlying cave development, helping target field investigations to areas with high potential for significant discoveries. These technological approaches complement rather than replace physical exploration. The direct experience of underground environments remains essential for understanding their full complexity and developing the intuitive knowledge that comes only from personal observation. As we've journeyed through the world's most remarkable underground environments, we've encountered extraordinary diversity, from crystal giants to flooded labyrinths, from ancient art galleries to living laboratories of evolution. Each of these subterranean realms offers unique insights into our planet's processes and our species' relationship with the darkness beneath our feet. Caves serve as time capsules, preserving evidence of geological, biological, and cultural history that might otherwise be lost to the more dynamic conditions of the surface world. They function as natural laboratories, where processes occur in isolation, creating opportunities to study complex systems under controlled conditions rarely found in surface environments. Perhaps most fundamentally, they remind us that our planet operates in three dimensions, the familiar surface representing just a thin interface between the atmosphere above and the vast, largely unexplored realm below. The underground world continues to yield new discoveries with each passing year. Previously unknown passages in mapped systems, entirely new caves in unexplored regions, novel species adapted to subterranean conditions, and archaeological evidence that reshapes our understanding of human history. Modern exploration techniques and scientific approaches continue to expand the boundaries of known underground environments, yet the rate of new discoveries suggests that we've documented only a fraction of what exists beneath the surface. Each new finding potentially transforms our understanding not just of the underground realm, but of how our planet functions as an integrated system, surface and subsurface environments connected through complex exchanges of water, energy, and living organisms. This recognition of interconnectedness perhaps represents the most significant shift in how we understand caves, not as isolated curiosities, but as integral components of larger environmental systems that influence everything from water resources to biodiversity. Our journey through Earth's underground realms reveals not just the physical diversity of these environments, but their profound significance across multiple dimensions of human experience. Caves have shaped spiritual beliefs and artistic expression throughout human history, provided shelter and resources in challenging environments, preserved evidence of past climate conditions and extinct species, and continue to inspire scientific inquiry and personal adventure in our own time. They represent some of the last truly wild places on our increasingly documented planet environments, where the unexpected remains possible and significant discoveries await those willing to venture beyond the familiar light of the surface world. As we've seen, throughout our exploration, the darkness beneath our feet contains wonders that continue to expand our understanding of our planet and ourselves, an enduring frontier where mystery and discovery remain as abundant as they were for the earliest human explorers who first ventured into the unknown with flickering torches, curiosity, and courage. As we conclude our journey through Earth's hidden realms, we might reflect on how these underground environments have shaped human imagination and understanding across cultures and throughout history. From the earliest cave painters who created art by flickering firelight to modern scientists, mapping three-dimensional labyrinths with laser technology, humans have been drawn to explore, interpret, and sometimes transform the darkness beneath the surface. We've created myths to explain these mysterious spaces, developed technologies to access their depths, and gradually built scientific frameworks to understand their formation and significance. Throughout this evolution, caves have retained their power to inspire wonder and humility, reminding us of processes that operate on timescales far beyond human experience and revealing adaptations that demonstrate life's extraordinary resilience in even the most challenging environments. Perhaps this is their greatest value, providing tangible connection to both our planet's deep history and the ongoing processes that continue to shape our world in ways that remain partially hidden from our surface-dwelling perspective. And now, as we emerge from our mental exploration of these remarkable underground realms, perhaps you're feeling the gentle pull of sleep, that other great journey into darkness, where consciousness drifts and thoughts flow like underground rivers, finding their own paths through the landscape of dreams. The steady drip of water forming stalactites might echo the rhythm of your slowing heartbeat as relaxation deepens. The darkness of the cave parallels the darkness behind closed eyelids, a space where imagination can create its own reality unbound by the constraints of waking perception. Just as explorers must trust their equipment and preparation when venturing into unknown passages, you can trust that sleep will carry you safely through the night, to emerge refreshed when morning light returns. And like the most remarkable cave systems that continue to yield new discoveries with each expedition, each night's journey through sleep reveals new landscapes of the mind, territories, uniquely yours to explore as consciousness shifts from the familiar surface world to the deeper realms, where restoration and renewal occur in the peaceful darkness of rest.